Chapter 650, A Colossal Lie. Chapter 650, A Colossal Lie. There will be more and more people. We have to finish quickly. Ling Han sheathed his sword and turned back to look at the wall that was blocking their way forwards. They could no longer advance. 999 stone squares, and a human portrait was carved on every square. There were young and old, men and women. Is this some kind of mechanism? Press the wrong button and a terrifying restriction will be activated to kill the trespasser? Ling Han mumbled to himself. After his eyes had swept once over the portraits, he stopped at one of them and smiled. That should be the case. Isn't this the face of Zi Xuexian? If I had not obtained the memory crystal inside the thunder battle armor, and only came here by coincidence, then I would have only had 1,000 chance to have picked this square. Going by Zi Xuexian's personality, she would definitely not give anyone a second chance. There must be a restriction here that would kill off any trespassers. The walls of this cave have been completely refined by her, probably for the purpose of killing trespassers, so that the secret is not leaked. With a flick of his finger, he shot out a stream of energy that knocked onto that portrait of Zi Xuexian. Instantly a ka sound was heard from the stone wall, and it began to move, slowly splitting into two. It moved slowly at first, gradually gaining speed, and it was very quickly completely open, revealing a stone chamber. It was not very big. Its width was only about 10 feet and only about 20 feet deep. The contents were even more simple. There was only a table and a book lay on it. Ling Han walked inside. Hunyo naturally followed closely behind. Rabbit, on the other hand, followed in as well after some hesitation. The stone wall quickly fused together again and closed them inside the stone chamber. However, though it was completely sealed inside, it was not dark. The walls all around them shone with a soft light as if they were made of beautiful jade. Ling Han walked to the long table, then sat down and flipped open the book. This was what Zi Xuexian had left behind. There was no ultimate treasure, and for a grand and mighty shattering void-tier cultivator, this was extremely unpresentable. Ling Han began reading. Suddenly, his brow wrinkled into a frown before an enraged expression appeared on his face and his killing intent spiked. After he had finished reading the book, he slammed his hand heavily onto the table, almost flipping it over. Let Lord Rabbit see. Rabbit snatched the book and immediately began to read. Soon it too looked astonished. There was no way it could not be astonished. If what Zi Xuexian had written was true, then everyone in this whole world was living in a gigantic lie. Ling Han sorted out his emotions. What she had said was, about a few millennia ago, there were certain parties in the realm of immortals that suddenly became interested in the lower realm. Not only were they interested in the various resources available in the lower realm, but their interest also extended to the living beings of this lower realm. This was an extremely horrifying thing. These few parties of the realm of immortals had obtained an ancient formula that could refine all the living creatures of an entire realm to concoct an immortal-grade pill. It would possess all the resources of the realm, as well as the restrictions of the entire realm. Even in the realm of immortals, this would be considered an extremely valuable, treasured medicine. However, it was a taboo in the realm of immortals, and was definitely not allowed to be concocted. Nonetheless, it was a different case for the lower realm. These few parties of the realm of immortals easily took control of this whole plane, and their representatives were the 5 ancient great sects. Why was it that every time that a massive catastrophe happened, the 5 great sects would somehow manage to solve the crisis at the end? That was because they were part of the whole scheme themselves. Furthermore, it was nothing like solving any crisis, but rather dealing with the aftermath. These parties of the realm of immortal realm laid out their plans for the duration of 10,000 years, and like they were raising beasts for slaughter, they used these 10,000 years' time for the lower realm to recover and regain vitality. This time also allowed a prosperous era to dawn in the greater environment as various geniuses and elites appeared in quick succession. Great numbers of natural treasures appeared as well. This was the accumulation of 10,000 years that would lead to a great explosion. And all this was the purpose of helping the realm of immortals to concoct the realm pill. A pill concocted from the living creatures of an entire realm. Its effects were naturally outstanding. Zi Shuexian was an outstanding disciple of the Blue Thunder sect, as well as the descendant of some powerful race of the realm of immortals. After she found out the truth, she was greatly angered. On one side, she left behind all the truth that she had uncovered, and on the other, she began to fight back against those reapers from the realm of immortals. Ling Han had witnessed the results. There were too many elites from the realm of immortals, and 3 of them joining forces were enough to suppress her. And the establishment of the Restore Heaven Academy was a conspiracy too. Its purpose was indeed to pick out the greatest prodigies of the generation, but it was not to leave behind any sparks for the future. Instead, they would be brought into the realm of immortals, and after they had been brainwashed, they would become the vassals of those parties. In simpler words, they would become lackeys. They were geniuses, after all, so they would be able to become very useful lackeys. Furthermore, high-level alchemists or alchemists that were outstandingly skilled would also be brought into the realm of immortals, where they would be taught the alchemy skills for immortal grade pill concoction. But it was naturally not for the purpose of nurturing them. Instead, they were merely thought of as pure tools for the concoction of alchemical pills. By that time, aside from those that had a certain background in the realm of immortals like Rabbit, all other human beings and living creatures would be exterminated, whether they were human or demonic beast, plants, or even stone spirits, fire spirits, or water spirits. After the realm pill had been concocted, the whole lower realm would become lifeless, as practically all living creatures had died off completely. These parties from the realm of immortals were the real headquarters of the Heaven's Sword sect and the Absolute Saber sect, and they were called the Heaven's Sword Palace and Ultimate Saber Palace Hall. They were very powerful parties of the realm of immortals, and it wasn't that their actions were unknown to everyone in the realm of immortals, but that those that knew were wary of their power. Furthermore, their actions only harmed the ants of the lower realm, so everyone merely turned a blind eye to it. Moreover, those creatures that had backgrounds like Rabbit would be spared, so those elders that had long since ascended to the realm of immortals would not make a big fuss about it, either. In conclusion, the Heaven's Sword Palace and the other powerful parties proceeded very successfully in this matter. In total, they had concocted the realm pill a few dozen times, and had used it to nurture a great number of elites, so they were already at the level of outstanding power in the realm of immortals. If Ling Han had not had his physical body shattered by the Black Tower in his last life, he would have had only 2 choices. The first was that he would be brought to the realm of immortals, and with his talent in alchemy he would definitely be nurtured, and perhaps might even marry a woman from the realm of immortals as his wife. But in the end, he would not be able to escape the fate of being a servant. Otherwise, if he fought with his life, with his limited power against their superior might, his fate would ultimately be death. It was precisely because of this that the 5 great sects hated the Thousand Corpse sect so much. That was because the Thousand Corpse sect wanted to turn all living beings into their corpse soldiers, and if they did, how would they be able to concoct the realm pill? There would not be enough main ingredients left. Previously, Ling Han had wondered if the realm of immortals really wanted to invade the mortal realm. Had the 5 great sects been able to fight back and actually managed to force the invaders from the realm of immortals to return whence they came? However, the truth was that they were all in it together. After the realm pill had been concocted, the Heaven's Sword Palace would leave behind some seeds and allow 10,000 years' time for the lower realm to slowly recover its vitality as they waited for the next harvest. The Heaven's Sword sect and the other great sects were responsible for standing by and leading the world of martial arts. Otherwise, 10,000 years could have passed, and the overall level of martial arts in the lower realm might only have recovered to the level of the spiritual ocean and the spiritual pedestal tier. In that case, the realm pill concocted would not be as effective. and the current 10,000 years' time was almost up. The Reapers from the realm of immortals would enter into lower realm, join forces with the Heaven's Sword sect and the other great sects, and concoct the new realm pill with the whole mortal realm as their furnace, and all living creatures in this world would be their ingredients. Damn them, they are all bastards. Rabbit flew into a thundering rage. Chapter 651, Breaking Through in Rage. Chapter 651, Breaking Through in Rage. Ling Han was also in a thundering rage, and a vein throbbed dangerously on his forehead, while killing intent that seemed capable of turning the heavens into flames churned inside him. How despicable! They actually treated all the living things of an entire realm as if they were ingredients to be refined. How deranged was that? Could it be that the 5 immortal sects were really demonic beasts in disguise? But even if they were demonic beasts, human beings were not the only ones in the lower realm. On this land, there were his friends and family, but a great catastrophe could possibly befall them in the near future. This caused his killing intent to spike sky high. If the heavens are unjust, then I shall destroy the heavens. This thought came to being in Ling Han's heart. His whole body trembled, and he entered into a strange state. There was sword intent surging around his whole body as if he himself had become a sword, showing off his ability. Fuck, this brat is too excited. He's about to understand Tao. Rabbit exclaimed in shock. It was also filled with envy as well. People always said that it was easy to understand Tao in an extremely emotional state, but that was only true for geniuses. Otherwise, if your aptitude was not high enough, it would be a waste no matter how excited you became. Xiao. Ling Han's fingers moved unconsciously, and multiple flashes of sword qi danced. This was a sealed room, and it was not a big one, either. As the flashes of sword qi danced, they instantly filled the whole stone chamber. Ioyo, do you want to shoot your Lord Rabbit to death? Rabbit hurriedly scrambled away. However, there was sword qi everywhere in here, so it could only circulate origin power and form a shield to take these flashes of sword qi head-on. Still, Ling Han's battle prowess was really too terrifying. Even if these flashes of sword qi had merely been flicked out by his fingers, their destructive power was shocking, causing it to yowl loudly as a result. Thankfully, it was a monster in its own right, and that height of his was something that not even Hunyo could bite through. So taking a few flashes of sword qi from Ling Han was still all right, though the resulting pain was still inevitable. Hunyo, meanwhile, giggled daintily and danced easily around the sword qi. Her body flipped and twisted, and could even change shape in an inconceivable way. She would instantly flash to a different spot, which looked very bizarre. Rabbit could not help but stare with wide eyes and mumbled, "Major accomplishment in body of lightning? How shocking! She can actually transform into lightning and freely change her body, and even flash like lightning and shrink space to form a kind of short-distance teleportation. If this girl really has an ancestor in the realm of immortals, what kind of level would he be? The king of immortals?" Ling Han entered into an unconscious state. In the depths of anger, it actually allowed him to obtain a breakthrough. The great door to 30 flashes of sword qi was slowly opening in front of him. He had stayed on the level of 29 flashes of sword qi for a very long time. This was a genuine barrier, and since long ago, it has been thought to be the maximum number of flashes of qi. Naturally, it was incredibly difficult to breach this barrier. Even if he was an especially gifted genius, he had still been jammed in by this barrier. But after so many days, he had already obtained a vague comprehension, and it seemed as if there was only a paper window blocking his way forwards. Yet, he always seemed to be just that bit away from success. It wasn't until this moment that, in the throes of rage, he managed to burst through that paper window. Wang. Ling Han's whole body, instead of merely his fingers, was exuding sword qi. 30 flashes of sword qi really was the limit. This was a transformation. He succeeded. Rabbit exclaimed in shock. This brat was a freak too. Comprehending qi actually seemed to be as easy as drinking water to him, although comprehension of qi was not that amazing and merely a very small hill on the path of martial arts, and there were more and higher mountains that had to be overcome. It was enough to see how much of a monster Ling Han was. Ling Han suddenly opened his eyes and looked faintly pleased. He had never thought that he would be able to reach 30 flashes of qi under such conditions. Now he could finally form Ray, and no longer needed to battle with pseudo-Ray. His battle prowess would naturally experience another upgrade yet again. However, the pleasant surprise could not erase his fury. The 5 great sects were really demented. They obviously treated the whole world as farm animals to raise for slaughter. Yet through these 10,000 years, they put out an image that said, "I am your savior," and had everyone in the world revere their presence. No wonder the Thunder Empress said that they had all been living in a colossal lie. After the destruction of the world, someone would definitely have left behind the truth of the matter. But the 5 great sects had 10,000 years to brainwash the people and destroy all evidence of their crimes. As a result, they still remained seated high on the pedestal. No wonder the 5 great sects guarded ancient maps so closely. They were afraid that some clues might have been left behind on the ancient maps that would reveal the secrets of 10,000 years ago, or even 20, 50, 100,000 years ago, the shady business that they had been doing all this while. Ling Han's emotions stabilized. Emotions could not solve the problem. Instead, letting his emotions affect his decisions could bring him ruin. For example, if he now loudly announced the real faces of the 5 great sects, how many would actually believe his words? Aren't you just simply smearing the good names of the 5 ancient great sects? Slandering the great people who have done such outstanding service 10,000 years ago? Such a thing should be punishable by death. No wonder the small Saber King was so indifferent to life. That was because, in his eyes, all living things were merely the dregs of concoction later. So what would the deaths of a few harm? I swear that I not only will flatten the 5 great sects here, but I will also charge up into the realm of immortals in the future, and those so-called 5 great immortal sects will not be able to escape the fate of being eliminated, either. Ling Han exclaimed, gripping his fists, "Brat, Lord Rabbit will support you in spirit." Rabbit said very undependably, "Ling Han, Nyo supports you. Beat everyone down, and you become emperor and Nyo becomes empress." Hu Nyo, on the other hand, was very loyal and had no idea what the word embarrassed actually meant. Ling Han laughed loudly, but when Hu Nyo mentioned emperor and empress, his heart moved. Zi Shuexian not only left behind the truth, but also mentioned how to solve the current dilemma. That was simple: split open the skies. Bring the whole lower realm and soar into the realm of immortals, so that the whole lower realm would become a part of the realm of immortals. The realm of immortals had its own regulations, and the 5 great immortal sects would definitely not harm the citizens of the realm of immortals. Otherwise, they would really be overthrown and suppressed by the whole realm of immortals. Even if the 5 great immortal sects were very powerful, they would definitely not be able to stand against that. Splitting open the skies, easier said than done. Feng Puyin said that shattering the empty void and becoming immortal was a very dangerous thing to do. Now that was because the 5 great immortal sects had sealed the path to become immortal for this lower realm, and have laid out a deadly array that could kill any shattering void tier cultivator. In this realm, shattering void tier was the strongest. Even when immortals descended into the lower realm, they would be suppressed and restricted by the Tao of the world. But the moment one left here, then shattering void tier cultivators would still be shattering void tier cultivators, whereas immortals would have recovered their status as immortals. It was as easy as turning over one's hand for immortals to kill shattering void tier cultivators. Thus, only the members of the 5 great sects could shatter the empty void and enter into the realm of immortals. But if any other person made the attempt, they would only be seeking their own death. However, now was also the best time. because the development of the lower realm had been changed by the 5 great immortal sects. Practically all the accumulation that had gone on for these 10,000 years would be released in this short period of a few hundred years. This would allow them to maximize the effects of the realm pill that they would concoct, and for the cultivators in this realm, that was also a fated opportunity that would allow them to grow extremely fast. If not, how would there have been so many geniuses? Ling Han could not help but think, what about those 4 disciples of his? If they too had become immortals, had they then sold off their pride as well? Ling Han's expression darkened. In future, if he could manage to meet Jian Yufeng and the others, he would definitely ask them clearly. Otherwise, he would definitely act on the rules of their school and root out any disciples with bad moral character. Now, the problem had come back to the matter of splitting open the skies. Splitting open the skies definitely had to be done through the form of a country. That was because an individual had limited power, but if one wanted to bring the whole lower realm into the realm of immortals, the power needed would exceed even a few hundred or a few thousand shattering, void-tier cultivators. As a result, one could only borrow the power of the nation to be able to pierce through the 9 skies and enter into the realm of immortals, transforming the whole lower realm into a part of the realm of immortals, wherein everyone had the hope of becoming an immortal. Ma Duo Bao. Ling Han suddenly remembered. Ma Duo Bao had mentioned to him a few times the notion of splitting open the skies and pointed directly at the realm of immortals as their greatest enemy. Could it be that he had long since known the truth of the matter? If not, why would he have established the Purple Moon Empire? Chapter 652, Plans. Chapter 652, Plans. I have to go see Ma Duo Bao, Ling Han declared. Actually, this so-called truth was only Zi Shui Xian's side of the story, but Ling Han had seen the memory crystal that she had left behind. Additionally, it could logically clear up all the doubts he had had in his mind for all this while, which made him choose to believe that it was the truth without any hesitation. Splitting open the skies is the only way, but first we have to establish a country, Ling Han thought, and could not help but smile bitterly. He was a man that enjoyed being free, and to be an emperor was really too much torment for him. For the sake of my parents, my friend, Xian Er, and the others, no matter what, I have to do it. Ling Han soon found his resolution. However, if I rashly establish my own country, that would only attract full suppression from the 5 great sections. Even if I have the Black Tower, I cannot possibly take a whole country with all citizens inside it in an instant. In that case, how could a nation's leader that keeps running away win the hearts of his people and be strengthened by power of the nation? Collect resources widely and slowly become king. I can go first to the Restore Heaven Academy. That is a place that has gathered at least 90% of the geniuses of the world. And if I could gather them all by my side, then as long as my power reaches the standard, I would become capable of moving this whole world overnight. That's right, that's right. Not only are those people highly talented themselves, they are also the cream of the crop from various parties. Gaining their support would be equivalent to gaining the support of the parties standing behind them, and this would be of great benefit to establishing my own nation. Hence, the first step is that I must once again use my identity as a heaven-grade alchemist, and secondly, like a peacock stretching its tail feathers, I must keep a high profile in the path of martial arts to increase the odds in my favor. Young people, right? To gain their backing, you'd either have to give them enough benefits or dominate them thoroughly in terms of pure power. I am capable of doing both. I can still make an attempt for some parties, but there are some parties that may or may not be the dogs of the 5 great sects. And before I reach major accomplishment level in my individual power, I definitely must not mention the matter about establishing my own nation. Neither can I reveal the evil plans of the 5 great sections. I can only allow those that I trust absolutely to participate in this matter. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing are fine. Big Brother Feng is fine too. I hope Big Brother Feng would not be too hot-tempered. Though he is an ultimate elite of the Shattering Void tier, he is, after all, only in the second layer of the tier. If he were really to stand alone against the might of the 5 great sects, the results would be unthinkable. The 5 great sects, lasting for dozens of millennia, have never experienced a lapse in their inheritance. Having hold of all the resources in this land, who knows what kind of power they possess? It may even be possible that, for insurance, the 5 sects of the realm of immortals have secretly placed a few immortals here. If they encounter a shattering void tier cultivator that is too strong, they would directly regain their cultivation as immortals and kill him off immediately, just like what they had done to Zi Shuexian years ago. I have to be very cautious. Before we split open the skies, the greatest enemy would be the 5 great sects, and I must first overthrow them. Then take advantage of the interval, when the 5 sects of the realm of immortals have yet to invade the lower realm, to split open this sky and bring this whole land to ascend into the realm of immortals. A clear plan took form in Ling Han's mind. He formed his hands into tight fists, his whole body filled with fighting spirit. He now clearly knew who his enemy was and whom he should aim his sword at, so his target was clear. Ling Han, it's not fun here, let's go. Hunyo hopped over and rubbed against Ling Han dearly. Ling Han laughed loudly and picked Hunyo up. Even if it was only for the sake of this little girl, he was willing to declare war on the whole world and the realm of immortals. He nodded and looked towards that stone wall from which they had entered. There was a handle on it, and now there was naturally no further need to identify Zi Shuexian's portrait to be able to open the mechanism. He stored the notebook she had left behind into the Black Tower. Ling Han was filled with admiration for this woman. For the sake of all the living beings of the world, she betrayed her own clan and stood against the immortals, eventually dying. What an amazing woman! She should be remembered by every single person in the world. If he managed to successfully split open the skies, then the greatest credit would have to go to Zi Shuexian. Ka. The stone door slowly opened. The doors open. Grab the treasure. Instantly, a group of 7 people rushed in, and even while they were scrambling in, they continued to move against their companions, engaged in a fierce battle. But they immediately spotted Ling Han, Hunyo, and the large white rabbit inside the stone chamber. They were initially confused, stopping in their tracks. They aimed their weapons at them, obviously thinking that Ling Han had obtained the treasure inside the stone chamber. Hand over your spatial ring, and I can spare your life, a man declared coldly. He looked to be in his 30s. There was a gloom to his features, and he had a terrifying air of violence about him. Ling Han smiled slightly, raising both his hands, and asked, "What if I don't have a spatial ring?" "No matter what kind of spatial spirit tool you have to leave it behind," another spoke up. He was dressed entirely in silken robes of silk, and looked very flamboyant. "Take off all your clothes before you can leave." An old man who looked to be in his 60s, his eyes focused on Ling Han's lower body, and gaze filled with maliciousness. This old bastard, a psycho and a pervert. Ling Han's face instantly darkened. Xiao! With a leap, accompanied by flickering lightning, he appeared in front of that old man, striking forth with a stab without using any kind of martial arts technique. He pierced the heart of the old man. Pooh! Blood spurted, and the old man looked at Ling Han in disbelief. He was in the spiritual infant tier, and this boy was only in the flower blossom tier, but the result was that he was killed with a stab that burst his heart. This was something that not even death could make him accept. Ling Han withdrew his sword. Pa! The old man instantly flopped lifelessly onto the ground. He smiled calmly and asked, "Anyone else wants the treasure?" The remaining 6 people all shook their heads simultaneously. What a joke! All of them were inferior in power to the old man, but Ling Han was capable of dealing with him with a single strike, so wouldn't dealing with them mean something as simple as striking 6 more times? Though underestimating his opponent played a part in the old man's instant death, Ling Han had also acted very casually. He had not used any kind of martial arts technique, yet was able to kill him with a single strike. This was something that none of them could do. They could take risks for the sake of treasure, but if it was a matter of purely delivering themselves up to be slaughtered, then forget it. No, no. We were just joking. Though natural treasures have no owner, but first come, first served is also an unofficial rule. Brother, I'll just take my leave. The 6 of them dared not stay any longer, fearing that Ling Han's murderous nature had been incited, and he would thus kill them too. After all, he had already killed one, so what would be the harm in killing a few more? Ling Han did not make any move to kill them, and allowed the 6 of them to leave freely. His mindset was now different. He had decided to make his name and reputation known as soon as possible. His reputation should at least not be inferior to the likes of Yao Huiyu and Small Saber King. He, too, exited the stone chamber. Now he had obtained the heaven cloud, purple thunder, and had also found out the truth that Zi Shuexian had left behind. There was no significance in staying here any longer. Ling Han and Hunyo left, and after casually tapping a finger on Rabbit, he and Hunyo directly entered into the Black Tower. Next, he planned to merge with the heaven cloud, purple thunder, and completely form a body of lightning. He would then form Sword Ray and cultivate Body of Diamond, and make an attempt to break through to the spiritual infant tier. As for Rabbit, who cared where it wanted to go? For the moment, Ling Han had no plans to let this rabbit know the secret of the Black Tower. After embracing Zhu Xian'er and sharing a few intimate words with her, Ling Han began the merging process with the heavenly cloud, purple thunder. Chapter 653, Minor Accomplishment in the Body of Lightning. Chapter 653, Minor Accomplishment in the Body of Lightning. Ordinarily speaking, it was impossible for Ling Han to merge with this divine thunder. This was a divine being that would soon develop into a thunder spirit, and the heavenly cloud purple thunder could definitely be considered one of the top 10 strongest powers of thunder. So no matter what, one would have to at least be in the heaven tier to be qualified to merge with it. For someone like Ling Han, a member of the young generation, if he wanted to merge with this purple thunder, then he would have to gain the assistance of an ultimate elite of the heaven tier or the shattering void tier, and have them use their great powers to disperse the aura of violence and malice of the purple thunder. Otherwise, the power of thunder would explode within his body, and no matter how much of a genius he was, he would only die a clean death. But Ling Han did not need that, because he had the Black Tower. In here, he was a god, and no matter who it was, they would have to grovel beneath his feet. Naturally, a thunder spirit would be no exception. What more when it had yet to become a thunder spirit? However, the merging process was still not as simple as Ling Han had imagined. The heavenly cloud purple thunder was too high in level. Even if Ling Han managed to recover the cultivation level of his last life, it was not an easy feat to refine it. What more with his cultivation of this lifetime? With the Black Tower, Ling Han merely possessed the ability to refine the purple thunder, but that did not mean it could be easily done. Ling Han did not feel rushed, either. There were still about 4 months before the day that the Restore Heaven Academy would enroll new disciples, so he still had plenty of time. He decided to amaze the world with a single brilliant feat in this round of enrollment, and become the idol of this generation, the summit. This way, when he waved out an arm to beckon them in future, there naturally would be countless numbers willing to follow his lead. The effects of an idol could not be underestimated. For example, with how Wang Yiyun established the Striking Heaven Alliance, wasn't it because she had the support of the well-known Lang Yutian? Of course, Wang Yiyun's own charm was not to be overlooked, either, but regarding this, if Ling Han was willing, he, too, could have Zhu Xian'er play the part of ambassador. The North regions know, with the greatest beauty in the whole world as the face of his party, who would not impatiently come. The power of thunder spread out within Ling Han's body, continuously remolding his body and changing every bit of blood and flesh in his body into lightning. This was very interesting. He had cultivated the body of iron sheet, so his physique was on par with precious metal of the same level. But if his body were to transform into lightning, he would become an untouchable existence. An ancient legend streaked through his mind. This was something he had heard of in his last life. Someone who was about to cultivate a body of lightning, or something along the likes of a body of flames, or a body of ice, was referred to as spirit body. The biggest characteristic of spirit body was that the possessor could ignore physical bodies. Even if someone's power was 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times stronger than that of another person, with the latter's body being capable of transforming into pure lightning or pure flames, they had no physical body. So how would one be capable of causing them injury? Then wouldn't that mean being invincible? No, pure power could not injure him, but chi was capable of it. Sword chi, saber chi, staff chi, as long as it was chi, it was capable of injuring a spirit body. But how much damage could be caused would depend on the power gap between the two parties. It was possible that no damage would be done at all, or it was possible that a heavy injury could be inflicted, possibly even a mortal wound. No matter when, power was might. This was also why those who had cultivated chi could be termed as rulers. That was because that was the only means to injure a spirit body off course. Since chi could do it, there was no further need to speak of Rei. Body of iron sheet, meanwhile, was completely different. This was an upgrade of one's physique. So who cared whether you had cultivated sword chi or not? He could simply take it head on. There was no need for empty words, as he would be using his might to speak for himself. A physique on par with precious metal of the same level. There was no way that normal sword chi could inflict any injury upon it. From the defense angle, body of iron sheet and body of diamond are naturally more awesome. After all, that is something that the indestructible Heaven Scroll has brought out from the Black Tower. Ling Han thought, but there was nothing bad about having a body of lightning. At least, it could increase his speed by a few times. Aside from that, it could allow him to make his powerful, tough physique into the last trump card up his sleeve. Others would imagine that they would only have to get through his defenses, but who would have thought they could not do anything to him at all, and would allow him a good opportunity to deal them a killing blow in counterattack. Naturally, the more trump cards I have, the better. The unexpected thing was that not only did the thunderclap ninth heaven absorb the power of thunder, so did the indestructible Heaven Scroll. It automatically began to circulate and started to compete with the thunderclap ninth heaven. More importantly, the indestructible Heaven Scroll was much more awesome, so the thunderclap ninth heaven, like a little daughter-in-law that had been wronged, could only get a little bit after the indestructible Heaven Scroll had swallowed multiple huge mouthfuls. Fuck, what I want now is to form a body of lightning. Why do you have to fuck asterisk snatch stuff now? Body of diamond can completely be formed with the use of other natural treasures. Don't waste the power of thunder. Ling Han hurriedly took the initiative to suppress the indestructible Heaven Scroll, not allowing it to continue circulating. Finally, the thunderclap ninth heaven managed to transform from a little daughter-in-law into a mother-in-law, and began to greedily absorb the power of thunder, which abruptly increased the rate at which Ling Han transformed into lightning. Time passed quietly. Ling Han could not tell the difference between night and day, and placed his complete focus on transforming into purple thunder. He now had reached the peak of the flower blossom tier, and had also polished his cultivation on this level to its maximum capacity, and there was no further space for improvement. Thus, there was naturally no further need to cultivate. No matter how much he cultivated, he would not get any further benefits. Thankfully, the space inside the Black Tower was unusually massive, and uncountable flowers, herbs, and trees had been grown here. There were also various wild beasts and demonic beasts. So Zhu Xianer and Hunyao would not be too lonely as they spent their days feasting and drinking. Furthermore, after Zhu Xianer had crossed the boundary to the flower blossom tier, her cultivation also began to spike sharply. She had originally been one of the strongest geniuses of the North region, and was inferior in no way to the likes of Wen Yi Jian or Mu Rongqing. Now, with the support of an endless supply of resources, her cultivation rate naturally sped up. Moreover, there had always been an unyielding spirit inside her. Every time they encountered danger, she would have to first duck inside the Black Tower, but Hunyo was able to bear the risks alongside Linghan. The main reason was because her power was not strong enough, and she could only become a burden to Linghan. She wanted to become stronger. Geniuses were not scary. What was scary was someone who was obviously a genius, but was still willing to put real effort into her cultivation. That really was someone that ordinary people could only look up to. 1 month, 2 months. Linghan finally cultivated the thunderclap 9th heaven to minor accomplishment level, and could completely transform his whole body into lightning. With this coordinating with his thunderclap 9th heaven, his speed could be displayed to its maximum capacity. At the same time when he attacked, the power of lightning would accompany his attacks. This was the heaven cloud purple thunder, and the power of lightning it possessed could even pose a threat to the heaven tier elites. If it was not for the fact that this was the critical moment for its metamorphosis into a thunder spirit, how could it be possible that Linghan could so easily capture it? Luck was also a part of strength. Linghan did not stand up because there was still 1/3 of the power of lightning left. Naturally, he could not allow it to be wasted. Thus, he did not suppress the indestructible heaven scroll any longer, and allowed this cultivation technique to once again begin absorbing the power of lightning. The thunderclap 9th heaven was still circulating. Forming a body of lightning was not the end, for he could still continue to endlessly absorb the power of lightning. Just like how a cultivator could accumulate origin power, lightning could naturally also be accumulated as well to increase its might. The quality of the heaven cloud purple thunder was really too high. Linghan felt that there was some shocking change taking place within his body. There would be occasional flickers of golden light all over his body, yet it was still short of the last step and unable to cross the threshold. Body of diamond was really too difficult to cultivate. It was even tougher than precious metal of the same level. It could be increased by another level at least. Like how Linghan was in the flower blossom tier, then the body of diamond he formed would have the toughness of level 7 precious metal. Even if he lay down and slept, whatever spiritual infant tier, cultivator, attacking him with full power would not possibly injure him. What more when the body of diamond could allow a detached limb to regrow, and he would only need to use the indestructible true fluid in exchange. Now he possessed 6 drops of indestructible true fluid, and once he formed the body of diamond, he could increase the maximum limit to 10 drops. Charge! Linghan absorbed the power of lightning like mad, and began to condense sword ray. In the instant that he formed body of diamond and condensed sword ray, he would break through to the spiritual infant tier and truly obtain a change in quality. Chapter 654. Breaking through to the spiritual infant tier. Chapter 654. Breaking through to the spiritual infant tier. Henyi. All of a sudden, another month had flown by. The main reason was because the heaven cloud purple thunder was really too difficult to refine. Altogether, Linghan had spent a total of 3 months' time to completely refine it. He'd used most of it to cultivate a body of lightning, and the remaining 1/3 was used to further improve Linghan's physique towards the level of body of diamond. But when the heaven cloud purple thunder was completely refined, Linghan was still a step away from the body of diamond. He took out the spiritual fluid and gulped it down like mad, while also summoning the heaven transformation bowl, harvesting the various spirit herbs inside the Black Tower and purifying them. This spiritual fluid originated from the 12 heaven mystery realms and could be considered a divine fluid. It had to be diluted first before it could be absorbed, but to form the body of diamond, Linghan merely diluted it to 1/10 of its original concentration now and began to gulp it down. Immediately, violent energy scrambled around within his body as if it had become a tsunami that wanted to crush it entirely. Ling Han hurriedly began circulating the indestructible heaven scroll to absorb this energy, and proceeded to do the final charge. Invigorating and agonizing. He felt it was invigorating was because his body had gained the support of an ocean's worth of energy and was another step closer to becoming the body of diamond. This kind of upgrade of one's life source was naturally very invigorating. But what was agonizing was the fact that this energy was really too violent. Its rampage caused the skin all over his body to shatter, and even the bones inside his body were making chong sounds as if they were about to break. At this time, Ling Han could not circulate the thunderclap ninth heaven and turn into a body of lightning to avoid harm. Also, he could not cultivate the body of diamond. He could only grit his teeth and bear it. He was pained and overjoyed at the same time, experiencing both ice and fire. Ling Han can't help but suck on his teeth, moaning. Previously, his whole body had been numbed by the heaven cloud, purple thunder, and now it was nearly torn by this raging energy. The road of martial arts was really difficult. It was no wonder few people could walk this road to its end. There were some things that merely declaring your determination was enough. It was easy to think, but to stick to your decision was a difficult thing. But the body of diamond was in the process of being cultivated. If it could be completed by walking a full 100 steps, then Ling Han was in the situation in which he had already taken 97 steps and was only a breath away from the finish line. By this time, even if Ling Han's arms, legs, and all the other bones in his body broke, he would still grit his teeth and bear the agony. 98 steps, 99 steps, 100 steps. Ling Han's body exuded an infinite expanse of golden light. He looked to have completely transformed into a golden war god, glowing with impressive divine might, standing up high. The body of diamond. At the same time, there was a flash of sword ray at his fingertips, which twined around 30 flashes of sword chi. It was currently in the process of changing from tightly entwined to merging together, becoming a genuine single existence. A real sword ray. Ling Han persisted and began to break through to the spiritual infant tier. In comparison, it was much easier to reach the spiritual infant tier because he had already taken this step in his last life. But whether it was the body of diamond or sword ray, neither was something that he had come into contact with in his last life. Then that would be easy. After merely about half a day's time, the 10 divine flowers began growing like mad, and on the earth's spiritual pedestals, the 5 divine flowers had pierced through the skies, whereas on the sky spiritual pedestal, the 5 divine flowers poured down like a waterfall from the sky. The 10 divine flowers actually entwined around one another and bore a massive divine fruit, and the spiritual infant was nurtured within the fruit. Ling Han beckoned, and spiritual fluid, spiritual fruits, as well as alchemical pills were all swallowed into his mouth and transformed into the most primary energy, helping him to break through to the spiritual infant tier. Most importantly, he had now formed the body of diamond, and with the rise of his cultivation level, his body of diamond would also be improved to another level. The amount of energy needed for that would be incredibly terrifying. Thankfully, he had already formed the body of diamond. This was a mere improvement, and in comparison was much easier to do. The divine fruit trembled slightly, and one could clearly see that there was wave-like movement inside. At first, the skin of the fruit was gold, but now it was gradually becoming more and more translucent. One could clearly see that there was actually a tiny human figure nurtured inside, and this human figure looked exactly the same like Ling Han. This was the spiritual infant and could be considered as a second divine sense of cultivators. In legends, after cultivators became immortals, the spiritual infant could even leave their bodies and travel all around the world. And if the divine sense of the cultivator was destroyed, the spiritual infant was also capable of replacing their divine sense, giving the cultivator a second life. In short, in the subsequent cultivation process, the spiritual infant was to be the priority, and everything would have to be planned with the spiritual infant as the center. Ling Han opened his mouth and sucked in great amounts of spiritual medicine like a great whale to birth the spiritual infant as soon as possible. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. Ling Han had originally thought that, as he had already passed this point once before, it should have been very fast for him to break through to the spiritual infant tier. But he had not expected that his spiritual infant would be born from 10 divine flowers altogether this time. If he wanted to transform them into a womb, there was a need for horrifyingly great amounts of energy. But at the same time, the spiritual infant born from this would naturally be stronger than before. Ling Han began to throw the sword ray, the body of diamond and body of lightning, onto the spiritual infant, although it was mere legend. But what if the spiritual infant was really capable of leaving his body in future? In that case, he wanted to have his spiritual infant possess the strongest power possible. He imprinted his martial intent on the divine fruit. This was something of his own. It was completely like a piece of blank paper, on which he could freely write whatever he wanted. Very quickly, innumerable patterns appeared on the surface of the divine fruit. Ling Han emblazoned all that he had learned on it. From a certain aspect, this was a second him. Anyways, if there was one day he lost his memory, he would be able to regain his own martial Tao from his own spiritual infant. Of course, that was only the Tao of martial arts. It was impossible to brand his personality and experiences on it, or at least it was impossible now. Another 7 days later, the divine fruit was covered completely in patterns and exuded an ancient, primordial air. The indestructible heaven scroll, especially, occupied 99% of the space, as if it was a monarch that had arrived. Whether it was the 3 great mystical powers or the 3 styles of black origin, they were all suppressed completely. From this, one could clearly see how high the indestructible heaven scroll was. Even the combined force of the 3 great mystical powers was not on the same level as a single % of it. Ka. Cracks appeared on the divine fruit, and the spiritual infant was about to come into being. Boom! Ling Han merely felt a tremble pass over his entire body, and the aura of his body instantly soared. The spiritual infant tier. In his dantian, the spiritual infant had burst out of the divine fruit and transformed into a tiny human figure that floated between the 2 spiritual oceans. Its eyes were in the process of opening, and a brilliant golden light shone from it, as if it was a god of war. Ling Han flicked Lighty with his finger, and his spiritual infant, too, flicked its finger. Hong! A flash of sword ray shot out, and the spiritual chi around them instantly compounded this attack, increasing the power of this strike by 100-fold. After entering the spiritual infant tier, it was no longer the divine flowers that would be stimulating the spiritual chi in the surroundings to compound one's battle prowess, but the spiritual infant. And Ling Han's spiritual infant was one that had been merged from 10 divine flowers, so its might was definitely not calculated by a simple addition. The first layer of the spiritual infant tier, but it is definitely no problem to battle a cultivator with 7 stars of the deity transformation tier. Ling Han smiled. This was extremely inconceivable. One had to know that the higher the cultivation level, the more difficult it would be to fight an opponent stronger than oneself. In his last life, the Sword Emperor and the others were also capable of fighting an opponent about 10 stars superior to themselves in Heaven Tier. And though Ling Han had yet to return to the Heaven Tier, and was merely in the spiritual infant tier now, his battle prowess could allow him to fight an opponent about 30 stars superior to himself. The mere thought of this would cause anyone's hair to stand on ends. Of course, this was in the situation wherein he fully maximized his battle prowess, such as using the 3 great mystical powers, or using 2 mystical powers along with the 3 styles of black origin. But even if he did not use his mystical powers or the 3 styles of black origin, but merely sword ray along with his basic battle prowess, it would be no issue to battle an opponent at 20 stars of the spiritual infant tier. Ling Han's opponents were no longer those prodigies of the same level. Only those superior to him by a whole cultivation tier would be qualified to compete with him. Hong, the Black Tower suddenly shook as well, and multiple great lakes suddenly appeared. In the sky, there were also waterfalls pouring down, which made for an inconceivable sight. You've broken through to the spiritual infant tier, and the second floor of the Black Tower is now open. Small Tower appeared. Chapter 655, The Second Floor of the Black Tower. Chapter 655, The Second Floor of the Black Tower. Henyi, the second floor of the Black Tower is open. Instantly, Ling Han felt greatly surprised and overwhelmed with curiosity, and said, "Quick, lead the way." "Haven't you already seen it before?" Small Tower asked calmly. A muscle twitched in Ling Han's jaw, and he said, "Are you playing around with me? Didn't you say that there are a total of 9 floors, and every floor has a treasure? You didn't embezzle it, did you?" Tisk. Small Tower felt absolutely nothing about this kind of joke, and with a mere snort it said, "There are indeed 9 floors in the Black Tower, but the power that seals off each floor is different. The rise of your cultivation until a certain level would mean that the power of one floor would be released. This would make the Black Tower become more powerful and have more uses as well." Ling Han rolled his eyes and asked, "Why didn't you tell me that sooner?" "I only awakened the memories regarding it after the second floor opened," Small Tower said calmly. Ling Han gazed at it in suspicion and asked, "And you call that amnesia?" "You can say whatever you like," Small Tower retorted shamelessly. "Fine, I'm scared of you." Ling Han sighed. "Then tell me, what kind of benefits does the second floor bring me?" Small Tower replied, "According to what I know now, the first 8 layers of the Black Tower have respectively sealed off the powers of the 5 elements, lightning, space, and time, and with the opening of every floor, the Black Tower would possess the corresponding power sealed within that floor." "Why don't I feel anything?" Ling Han was a little displeased. He had long felt great anticipation about the second floor of the Black Tower. "The first floor would be the essence of earth," Small Tower said calmly. "Why do you think that the spirit herbs in this place could grow so rapidly that 1 year's time would be comparable to 1,000 years outside?" It was only at this point that Ling Han was moved. The first floor had unsealed the power of earth, which was also the essence of earth, allowing him to endlessly retrieve and harvest spiritual medicine. This effect was extremely powerful. He asked, "Then the second floor has unsealed the power of water?" He looked at the waterfall in the skies, as well as the multiple great lakes that had appeared out of nowhere. "That's right. The second floor is the essence of water." Small Tower nodded. "What's the benefit?" Ling Han asked. "You're really such a profiteer. Can't you ask a more noble question?" Small Tower mocked. "I'm sorry for that." Ling Han gritted his teeth. "Aren't you a damn spirit tool? Can you not act so human?" Small Tower remained calm and said plainly, "Water, the source of all life. With the installation of the power of water, first of all, the growth rate of all spirit herbs would be even faster, and they would also grow faster than before. This effect was not bad." Ling Han nodded and asked, "What else? Can't you ask some noble questions?" Small Tower began to mock him again. Ling Han rolled his eyes and said, "Would you believe me if I say that when I can summon the whole Black Tower out, I will toss it into the toilet and let it be for 3 whole days and nights?" Small Tower was struck speechless as if it had gotten a scare. After a while it said, "Additionally, the essence of water interacting with the essence of earth will allow the birth of some divine herbs, such as the lotus flower of Buddha." Ling Han's heart shook. Lotus flower of Buddha. He had seen this name in an ancient historical site before. It was a true divine herb, and even in the immortal realm, belonged to the top tier of spirit herbs. The lotus flower of Buddha should be one of the lowest quality divine herbs. As the essence of water and essence of earth interact for a longer period, the greater value the divine herbs that come to be will be, but the time would be very, very, very long, Small Tower said. This guy had to deliberately keep him in suspense. And indeed, Small Tower continued, on the 3rd floor, the essence of metal will supply you with precious metals. On the 4th floor, the essence of fire can be used to refine your immortal body. The 3rd layer of the indestructible heaven scroll that you want to cultivate must be refined through the essence of fire. But on the 5th floor, the essence of wood can once again increase the rate of growth of spirit herbs inside the Black Tower, and only with the 3 essences of water, earth, and wood interacting with one another would unprecedented immortal herbs grow. On the 6th floor, the essence of lightning is meant to refine, and only with it would some unique quality immortal herbs grow. On the 7th floor, the essence of space. Only by that time can you be considered to have real ownership of the Black Tower. You may summon it out as you like to assist you in battle, and only then would you truly know how strong the Black Tower is. On the 8th floor, the essence of time. This is a taboo power of the world, and even I don't know the exact details about it. On the 9th floor, when he saw Small Tower pause, Ling Han could not help but ask, "What about the 9th floor?" "I don't know either," Small Tower said expressionlessly. Forget it. I had best avoid speaking to you too much in future, as I can be driven to death by fury, Ling Han said with a sigh. However, it was good news that the 2nd floor of the Black Tower was open, and now possessed the essence of water. He would obtain genuine divine herbs. He counted the time, and the enrollment test for the Restore Heaven Academy was soon to begin. He had to make his way there quickly. Ling Han! Ling Han! He called Zhu Xianer and Hunyo over. Hunyo immediately glued herself into his arms, and appeared to be very unhappy. Ling Han had not played with her again for a few months. Meanwhile, Zhu Xianer looked at him tenderly, her gaze incredibly moving. Ling Han nodded and said, "Let's go." They exited the Black Tower and headed towards 9 Dragons Mountain. Not long after, Rabbit found them, and naturally gave Ling Han a scolding. This brat actually disappeared for a few months without any sign or clue, causing Lord Rabbit to look for him very hard. Was he planning to renege on the 2 stalks of Dragon Blood Tyrant Ginseng? 3 days later, they returned to 9 Dragons Mountain. At this time, the basic conditions for enrolling into the Restore Heaven Academy had been announced, and those who did not satisfy these conditions needed not participate in the upcoming test, as they would not be qualified to enroll at all. If one wanted to obtain the qualification to take the test, they had to fulfill one of the following 2 conditions: reaching the Flower Blossom tier before being 40 years old, or breaking through to the Spiritual Infant tier before being 70 years old. As for those in the Deity Transformation tier, there was not much in terms of requirements, because even in the adult generation, there did not seem to have been any rumors of a genius in the Deity Transformation tier appearing. Another 2 days later, the test would officially begin. The test was divided into 2 parts. The first part appeared to be very simple, and that was to walk out of the zone that had been set up by the Restore Heaven Academy in a specific time limit. As long as one could walk out, then they would be qualified to become a disciple of the Restore Heaven Academy. The second part, meanwhile, was a stone-snatching battle. In another area, the Restore Heaven Academy would bury a great number of strange stones. They could not be stored into spatial rings, and could only be kept on one's person. These stones would shine, and this light was not something that could be hidden with mere clothing upon close distance. In a specific time frame, the few that could snatch the most stones would become those disciples that the Academy would nurture with priority. They would be on the same level as those prodigies who had obtained the invitation to directly enroll into the Academy, such as the Small Saber King and Yao Huiyu. Ling Han found the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing, and after considering for a long time, drew the both of them into the Black Tower before telling them of the message that Zi Shuexian had left behind. He had not spoken of it outside, because he feared that the sky had ears. This was something that Ma Duobao had said, and they had to be very careful. Ling Han did not know what kind of powers immortals possessed, nor did he know what moves the 5 immortal sects had laid in place in this realm. Perhaps they were capable of eavesdropping on a certain area and incite a reaction when such sensitive phrases like "split open the skies" were heard. Thus, safety first. Chapter 656, Acting Separately. Chapter 656, Acting Separately. Henyi. Both the Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing paled in shock before flying into thunderous rage. This news was really too subversive. It could even be considered treasonous, actually daring to rebuke the 5 ancient great sects that sat upon the high pedestal. But, on the one hand, Ling Han was their brother, and on the other, Ling Han had also analyzed various illogical points one by one. Both proved that Ling Han's words were not false. The Heaven's Sword sect and the other 5 ancient great sects, they deserved to be killed for their evil intentions. Only if we split open the skies will we be able to fight back. The Rain Emperor nodded. Mu Rongqing nodded as well, his expression extremely serious. Although he was usually carefree and willful, in the face of this kind of truth, he no longer smiled mischievously. Ling Han was overjoyed and exclaimed, "Big brother, how about you become the emperor?" Rain Emperor had been the ruler of the Rain country in the first place, and in terms of the power of the nation, his understanding had exceeded both Ling Han's and Mu Rongqing's, and perhaps even Feng Pian's. The Rain Emperor thought for a moment, but then shook his head and said, "I can't. It's not that I don't want to take on such a heavy responsibility, but I can't. Third brother, power of the nation is not as simple as you think. There's a saying that goes, what kind of stomach you have will determine how much you can eat. If it was to unite this whole realm and establish a single country, then the power of the nation of this level would be akin to an unprecedented divine herb. An ordinary person would only be incapable of taking such strong a medicine, and after consumption, would die as his body exploded from the strength of the medicine. That's right, third brother. Amongst us 3 brothers, your talent is the highest, so why don't you be this emperor? Big brother and I will be responsible for assisting you. Let us 3 brothers join forces and conquer this whole realm first." Mu Rongqing laughed. If third brother is unwilling, Hunyo would be fine too. The Rain Emperor smiled. He knew that Ling Han was not the kind of person to care about power struggles, and pulled Hunyo in to convince him. Hunyo happily took on the position, declaring, "Then you all have to call Nyo Milady Queen in the future." Ling Han merely grinned bitterly and said, "If we let this little girl be an empress, the country would descend into total chaos on the 2nd day. Then it'll be third brother." The Rain Emperor nodded, his mind made up. He, too, was not one to be overly fond of power. Otherwise, with his talent and power, he would have had been qualified to break through to the flower blossom tier in the desolate north, and it would be a piece of cake for him to unite all the 9 nations of the desolate north under his rule. Ling Han and his brothers began to talk about further details of establishing their own country and splitting open the skies. Something like establishing a country was naturally a small matter to the Rain Emperor. He had been on the throne for many years, and the only difference was the size and the overall power level of the territory. What else was different? Splitting the skies, though, was much more difficult. If they wanted to bring the whole realm to ascend with them into the mortal realm, how powerful would they need to be? It was a must to reach the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, and besides that they had to gather the combined power of the nation of an entire realm, which was a very terrifying thing. An ordinary person was naturally not much, but what about 10,000 or 100 million? Every person, via power of the nation, would contribute a portion to the person in charge of splitting open the skies. How powerful would this kind of power combined together be? Moreover, there was no shortage of cultivators in the realm, and if they joined together, there were really not that many shattering void tier cultivators that could take them on. However, Ling Han was different. He had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll, and had also formed the body of diamond. His physical resilience was on par with that of precious metal of the same level, and when he reached the shattering void tier, his physique would be on the level of divine metals. If he could improve this physique of his to its maximum capacity, then how could it be that the amount of energy he gathered be unable to split open the skies? By that time, Ling Han would be in a very strange condition. His cultivation level would only reach the peak of this realm, but his strength would have reached a mortal level, and his battle prowess would far exceed even that. To battle with the heavens, and to bring the whole realm and ascend. The more they talked, the more excited the three brothers became. This was a grand move. If they succeeded, their names would be forever remembered, and they would become legends. From today onwards, we have to work even harder on our cultivation. Let's first enter into the Restore Heaven Academy and rope in various prodigies. When the time comes, we will then establish our country and have all these people gather under our banner. To battle with the 5 ancient great sects. The mere thought of it is enough to make my blood boil with excitement and my fighting spirit soar. Ling Han withdrew a great amount of valuable medicines and herbs for his 2 brothers. Firstly, they could use these resources for their own cultivation, and secondly, they could use these treasures to open the path for themselves and befriend various geniuses. After all, if one wanted to pull another into one's camp, what else was there to do but to use both a carrot and a stick? The 5 of them exited the Black Tower. The enrollment test for the Restore Heaven Academy was about to begin. They did not go together. The Rain Emperor and Mu Rongqing also went their separate ways. This test was their first step to bribe and rope in their fellow candidates, so they naturally had to act separately so as to expand their sphere of influence. Hu Niu and Zhu Xian Er were still with Ling Han. The 3 of them arrived outside the mountain gate of the Restore Heaven Academy. It was something that had just been built, and there was a powerful ultimate elite standing guard, with several young disciples that were placed in charge of reception on the sidelines. These young disciples have all been transferred over form the 5 great sects, and they obviously wore expressions of pride. Even if they were unable to enter into the Restore Heaven Academy, they were still incredibly arrogant, were the names of the 5 ancient great sects not enough for them to be arrogant. The first step was the measuring of bone age and cultivation level. Those that were unable to satisfy the lowest requirements would not be qualified to even attempt the first part of the test. Zhu Xian Er was up first. She stretched out her jade-like, slender hand, causing the disciple who was in charge of measuring bone age to blush. The hand that was holding the golden needle kept shaking, and he was completely unable to pierce it into her skin. This hand was really too beautiful, just as if it had been carefully carved by the gods. Every inch was close to perfection, and he couldn't bear to pierce his needle into such a beautiful hand. He made several failed attempts to pierce it with the needle, but ultimately he had no choice but have a female disciple come over, and only then was the test for measuring bone age completed. 22 years old, this female disciple announced, an expression filled with shock appearing on her face. A flower blossom tier cultivator at 22 years of age, she was an impressive prodigy and could be ranked in the top 50, no, the top 30, even in the 5 great sections. This was an extreme shock. The ultimate elite, standing on the side, stroked his beard, appearing very happy. Looks like there was going to be a satisfactory sapling this time round again. He swept a glance at Zhu Xian'er and was slightly surprised. This girl had obviously disguised her appearance. Still, changing one's appearance would not be able to change one's bone age. No one insisted that one had to come with their real face, and this did not break any of the rules. The thought merely flashed through the mind of this ultimate elite, but he did not say anything much. The next one was Hunyou. Such a small little girl. A few disciples could not believe their eyes. Some of them even laughed and joked around. This was the Restore Heaven Academy enrolling disciples, not a game. Now, everyone was lining up to undertake the test for bone age, and behind them, someone immediately called out, "Don't mess around. Hurry up and get out of the way." Such a tiny little girl had better go home and drink her milk. "Big brother has a sweet here. Do you want to come over and suck?" Pum! A vulgar man was just about to say something filthy, yet it enraged Hunyo. With a flash, her little figure had appeared in front of him and thrown out a punch. As lightning crackled, she not only sent the man flying, but had even turned him into a corpse. Zizizi! There was white-colored lightning twisting around the man's body, making for a terrifying sight. All of a sudden, utter silence fell. Those that had come to take the test for bone age were either in the flower blossom or the spiritual infant tier. How could there be anyone that wanted to bluff their way in? That vulgar man was well known for having a taste for kids, but as he originated from a great clan, and he himself had also reached the flower blossom tier, he was also looked highly upon. Thus, no one had stood up against him before now. He was a flower blossom tier cultivator, yet was directly killed in an instant. How could this not surprise the masses? Hunyo placed her hands on her hips, and then humphed and said, "You dare to have rotten ideas about Nyo. You really are seeking your own death." Chapter 657, Testing Bone Age. Chapter 657, Testing Bone Age. Henny. Good. What a shocking little sapling. That ultimate elite who had just been taking catnap immediately snapped his eyes open, and even began clapping. As for the fact that a prodigy had just died, so what? This place was lacking anything but prodigies. Furthermore, since he could be killed with a single strike, what else could he be but trash? He was absolutely unqualified to enter the Restore Heaven Academy. "Little girl, what's your name?" this great cultivator asked happily. He was the law keeper of the Absolute Saber sect, and his name was Guoliang Kai. He had the battle prowess of the deity transformation tier, which was enough to suppress the current young generation. Otherwise, he would not have been able to keep watch here. When he looked at Hunyo, his expression was filled with tenderness. If it wasn't for the fact that his cultivation level was too low, he really would want to take Hunyo in as his true disciple. But a little girl that was only about 6 or 7 years old actually had the cultivation of the spiritual infant tier. How could he possibly be able to teach such a prodigy? Most likely, only the sect master and the elders would be qualified for this task. "Nyo is Ling Han's Hunyo," Hunyo said in a slightly confusing way. She then ran over to Ling Han and held his hand, looking completely like a naive, angelic little girl. If it wasn't for the fact that the vulgar man's corpse still lay on the ground, around which lightning was still popping, perhaps everyone would be fooled by how pure and adorable she looked right now. Guoliang Kai swept a glance over Ling Han and had his mind set. If Ling Han's talent was nothing impressive, he would kill Ling Han so that he would not affect this little girl any further. Such an excellent little sapling would be of great use. More importantly, she was still young, so she could be easily brainwashed and have various ideas instilled into her. Hunyo once again stepped forward for her bone age to be tested. This time, even the few disciples were extremely respectful. She was one that had obtained the adoration of a deity transformation tier law keeper. As long as one wasn't an idiot, they should be able to tell how shocking her future prospects would be with how Hunyo was so fierce even at such a young age. They could only revere her. Over 7 years old, not yet 8. Her bone age was very soon tested. However, Hunyo was a bit angry. It was a bit painful to be poked by a needle, which caused her to glare ferociously at the disciple who had tested her bone age. This ferocity was really very terrifying. It had even surpassed the level of the spiritual infant tier. That disciple actually lost control of his bladder in fear, and stench spread out from him. Ling Han was also surprised. He had not thought that Hunyo had also broken through to the spiritual infant tier. However, the little girl had always been weird, so no matter how fast her cultivation rose, It was completely normal. Hum! Guo Liangkai was very displeased and shouted at that disciple who had lost control of himself. Get lost and clean yourself up before you come back. Yes, yes. That disciple nodded rapidly before turning around and breaking out into a run. Yet in his heart there was an unbelievable contrast to Niu's glare was scarier than even Guo Liangkai. How could that be possible? Guo Liangkai was in the deity transformation tier. Ling Han stepped forwards, and the aura of the spiritual infant tier moved, proving that he had the qualification to take the test for Bone Age. At this time, he had restored his original appearance. Since he had made the decision to establish his own country and split open the skies, he decided that he would show his true face to the public in future. A heaven-grade alchemist could be claimed to be able to do whatever he wanted, wherever he wanted. Please stretch out your hand. For Hunyu's sake, the disciple in charge of conducting the test for Bone Age used the word please. Otherwise, he would have directly shouted for those that were not directly enrolled into the academy. Their talent was nothing too impressive, so why would he need to be too polite? However, Hunyu's appearance made them understand one fact, and that was that the world was really too big. Maybe a stunning, peerless prodigy would really appear at any time. You dare to act fierce to Niu's Ling Han. But Hunyu was still not very satisfied and glared at the disciple, her ferocious gaze on full display again. That disciple was instantly so scared that he fell down onto the ground. He felt as if he had become the target of a primal beast, and goosebumps appeared all over his body. He almost lost control of his bladder. He finally understood what his companion had experienced just now. This little girl was practically not human. Ling Han smiled softly and said, "All right, don't make trouble." It was only then that Hunyu changed to all smiles and happily took Ling Han's hand, looking completely like an obedient little girl. Even if you died because you were fooled by her deceptive appearance, she would not pay you your life back. Whoever believed her would be really unlucky. Ling Han stretched his hand out. That disciple had also stood back up after wiping the cold sweat off his forehead. His hand held a golden needle, but it was endlessly trembling. Though he had not been scared to the extent to lost control of his bladder, it was not a small scare either. I poke. He calmed his turbulent emotions and poked the needle at Ling Han's wrist. But the golden needle that was as thin as a hair off a bull's hide was actually unable to penetrate Ling Han's skin. "Don't use your origin power to protect," that disciple said in slight displeasure. However, he had yet to finish his words when an astonished expression appeared on his face. What a monster! He obviously had not used origin power to protect himself. Yet why was his skin so tough that even the penetrating bone needle could not pierce it? The penetrating bone needle was a tool especially used to test one's bone age. It could easily penetrate the skin of a spiritual infant tier cultivator, reaching all the way to one's bone, and extract a little bit of bone tissue. Then, the measurements inscribed on the needle would reflect the corresponding age. The younger one's age, the more accurate the measurement, which was measured in years. But after 100 years old, it would be 10 years, 20 years, 50 years as values, because by the time one reached about 400 to 500 years old, there would be practically no change in one's cultivation for at least the next 50 years. Yet, the penetrating bone needle was actually incapable of penetrating Ling Han's skin. Furthermore, he had not used his origin power to defend himself. Either, how could this be possible? It couldn't be that he had encountered a monster, could he? Quickly. How long do you want to keep poking Ling Han? Hunyu was displeased. Do you have something against Ling Han? You keep poking him again and again, without a vent, taking a breath in between. With Hunyu rushing him, that disciple was naturally even more nervous, and his hand trembled even more violently. Putting aside the fact that he could not pierce through Ling Han's skin, he did not even manage to pierce Ling Han's hand. Trash! Gua Liangkai stepped up and shoved the disciple aside after snatching the penetrating bone needle. Then he poked the needle at Ling Han's hand. Whoa! The golden needle dropped and quickly became short. The needle went through. No. Gua Liangkai was astonished in spite of himself. The penetrating bone needle became short, not because it had penetrated Ling Han's skin, but because Gua Liangkai had used too much strength, while Ling Han's skin was too tough, so it was directly crushed. That was why it looked like it had pierced through. Fuck, this monster. The people around them had initially been laughing mockingly at that disciple who had shamed himself, but now not one could even grin. How shocking was a physique like that? It remained unharmed even when a deity transformation tier cultivator moved personally. I'll do it myself, Ling Han said, and drew the demon birth sword. He slashed himself once, and instantly his skin broke. At first, Gua Liangkai was dazed. Then he immediately pierced the needle through the open wound and touched Ling Han's wound once before then drawing out the penetrating bone needle to take a look. An expression of great astonishment again appeared on his face, and he exclaimed in spite of himself, "Over 19 years old, not yet 20. I'm about to faint." The people around them were once again shocked, speechless. There actually appeared yet another monster. Though he was not as monstrous as Hunyao, if one took into consideration his terrifying physique, he was not really that far off. Ling Han put away the demon birth sword and did not even need to circulate the indestructible heaven scroll. Body of Diamond had already engraved all the secrets of the scroll into every bit of his flesh and blood, so his skin automatically healed. There was not even a tiny scar left behind, just as if he had never been struck by his sword. This caused the crowd to once again exclaim monster in spite of themselves. How were they supposed to beat Ling Han? The toughness of his physique was more or less at the limit of a spiritual infant tier cultivator. So how many people of the same cultivation level could penetrate his defense? Furthermore, his recovery ability was strong enough to cause one's hair to rise on ends. He was practically an invincible existence amongst all the peers of the same cultivation level. Chapter 658, Strange Winds. Chapter 658, Strange Winds. Henyi. After momentary shock, Gua Liangkai was extremely pleased. Now, with yet another prodigy, he was determined to pull him into the absolute Saber sect. Although the Restore Heaven Academy was co-established by the 5 great sects, since they were distinguished into 5 different great sects, there was naturally no shortage of fights and schemes among them. Everyone wanted to obtain higher quality fresh blood for their own parties. This was inevitable. Very good, very good. Gua Liangkai nodded in quick succession. Young man, I shall remember you. Ling Han smiled faintly. Gua Liangkai was only in the 5th layer of the deity transformation tier. His battle prowess was at most 9 stars, and Ling Han could suppress him even though at least he could battle the former to a Tiso. There was really no need for him to take Gua Liangkai seriously. Take him to heart. Furthermore, he really did not have any fondness for anyone from the 5 great sections. Ling Han and his companions successfully passed the test. The big white rabbit, because of apparently having lived for a few hundred years, would naturally not deign to take part in this test, and had gone off to who knew where to steal carrots. It would refer to any kind of valuable herb as carrot. The reason why Ling Han had not taken Rabbit into the Black Tower was precisely out of consideration for the fact that it was a kleptomaniac, and worried that it would ransack the entire Black Tower. He had to guard against villains, after all. After they were done testing Bone Age, they had to wait before proceeding to the first test. That was because there was a time limit, and all examinee would advance together. Ling Han and his 2 companions arrived at a public square. It was huge, and now there were about over 30,000 people gathered here. Yet only over half a day had passed from the moment the Bone Age test had begun. By the time it was over, there would definitely be even more people. What a shock! that there were actually so many people that fulfilled the requirements. Ling Han felt internally rueful. All the fortune of this realm had exploded in the recent 2 centuries, and this explosion really had tremendous effects on the world of martial arts. If it had been his last life, with the same conditions in place, it would be impressive enough if merely 1,000 had gathered here. What a great disparity! Ling Han did not deliberately seek out the Rain Emperor and Murong Qing, but someone found him. Ling Han. Qin Lianyu appeared, wearing a hesitant expression as she stared at him. After all, at that time, Ling Han had disguised his appearance. Yet Ling Han's distinguishing trait was very obvious. It was Hunyao. Aside from that monstrous little girl, who else would be able to pass the test today? It's been a long time. Ling Han nodded with a smile. It really is you. It was only now that Qin Lianyu could confirm his identity. Then, she gazed at him doubtfully. Is this your true face this time? As real as it can be. Ling Han replied, smiling. Qin Lianyu was stunned and said, I've never thought that you were so young. Thank you for your compliment, Ling Han said with a grin. Brother Ling. The 2 siblings, Li Fengyu and Li Zixian, walked over and greeted Ling Han. Hello. Ling Han nodded to them as well. This is... When Li Fengyu spotted Qin Lianyu, his eyes could not help but light up. He immediately took steps forward and said, Beautiful miss. I am a promising young man, Li Fengyu, shockingly good-looking and with handsomeness off the charts. I don't see how handsome you are, but you are really good at bragging, Qin Lianyu smiled. Oh, him? They call him Big Mouth Li, and boasting is his strength, Ling Han revealed. What? Li Fengyu feigned displeasure. I am not only skilled at bragging, but am skilled in all types of music wind instruments, bowed string ones, and I can play plucked string ones while singing. Brother, don't talk so much. Li Zixian, meanwhile, was flushing. With such a clown as her elder brother, she always felt as if she was trapped in hell due to the embarrassment. Little sister, this hair clip of yours is really pretty. Qin Lianyu approached Li Zixian. Women had their ways of communication, and soon Zhu Xianer was also pulled into the group. The 3 girls chattered endlessly and seemed to be having a very congenial chat. When Ling Han spotted Qin Yi, Helan Jun was naturally beside him. However, Ling Han shook his head at Qin Yi and did not allow him to come over and greet him. Look, Wenren Qian is here. Everyone focused their attention. This was a prodigy of the Wide Sun sect. She did not have any resounding reputation before, but rose up all of a sudden just recently. She had the ability to threaten the positions of such veteran geniuses like Yao Huiyu and the small Saber King. She really is gorgeous. She is definitely comparable to a fairy. In my opinion, only Fairy Yi Yun could compare to her. Could it be that you've forgotten Dong Linger? Hee, Dong Linger is obviously on a whole other level. In this world, there is no other woman able to compare with her, so there is absolutely no grounds for comparison in her case. The spectators were all saying such things as they wore entranced expressions. Even Ling Han was slightly curious. How beautiful could Dong Linger be that she would make so many prodigies entranced by her beauty? Wenren Qian was alone, extremely beautiful. Added with her astonishing power, no one actually dared to intrude in the 15-meter space around her. They all admired this fairy-like beauty from afar. Of course, there were also some recklessly bold men that dared to strike up a conversation with her. Those with good attitudes were merely coldly rejected. There were some who intended to use their clan or sect to coerce her, but they were forced into a retreat directly by her drawing her sword and cut very sorry figures. Ling Han spotted Lu Yuanji. This man still wielded a wooden sword and wore a wooden expression. His whole person seemed like a sword itself, but it was a sword that had yet to be drawn and gave off a feeling of being sealed. Out of those who could form sword heart in future, this man was definitely one of the most possible candidates. His full focus was on his sword, and he was absolutely mad about it. In his heart, only the sword existed. He was a prodigy, and with his diligency, not madness, the achievements he could attain were naturally shocking. This day passed very quickly. At dawn, the Restore Heaven Academy announced that the first round of tests would begin. They had a total of 3 days to traverse over 3 mountains and head to a ravine. The ravine's name was Ghost Lock Ravine. Those that managed to reach the destination within 3 days would be qualified to enter into the next round of tests. Furthermore, they would be able to enter the next round in advance, and those who arrived after the 3 days were up, but just go home. In the first round, it was forbidden to fight. Whoever breached this rule would be immediately chased out. In the second round, it was allowed to fight, but there was to be no killing. After all, everyone would be a disciple of the Restore Heaven Academy by that time. In this place, ultimate cultivators would continuously scan with their divine sense and monitor for any shock waves produced by battle. With a single signal, everyone set off. Ling Han nodded at Qin Lianyu, Li Fengyu, and the others before bringing Zhu Xian'er and Hunyo with him as they set off into the forest. He was slightly surprised. There were actually invisible air streams that originated from the side in this place. They almost managed to blow his whole body off the ground. Thankfully, his physique was strong enough, and as he sunk his center, it was as if he was a mountain, and whether it were a wind from the east, south, west, or north, what could it do to him? Zhu Xian'er, though, was lifted with a single breeze. Thankfully, Ling Han moved quickly enough and managed to grab her. Zhu Xian'er took advantage of the opportunity to fall into his arms and wore an embarrassed expression, but was filled with joy. Hunyo giggled and danced with the winds, and just when it seemed as if she would be blown far away, she transformed into a bolt of lightning that appeared by Ling Han's side. "Ugly girl, let go of Nyo's Ling Han quickly!" the little girl shouted loudly, her jealous nature on fire. Ling Han picked Hunyo up as well, and it was only then that the little girl finally quieted down with a pout. The direction of the wind changed again. This time it blew them forwards, but soon after, the direction changed again to blow them back, then blew them forward again and blew them to the left. The direction changed very rapidly. No wonder they were given 3 days' time to traverse 3 mountains. Apparently, the winds in this place blew randomly, and Ling Han was sure that the majority could not possibly make it to the end even if they were given 30 days. What more when they were given only 3 days? They would be able to become disciples of the Restore Heaven Academy just by walking out of this place in 3 days' time. So how could this kind of test be simple? Chapter 659, Array Focus. Chapter 659, Array Focus. Henyi. But for Ling Han, this was a piece of cake. His physique was too tough, and his whole body seemed like a mountain on its own. So how could he simply be blown away by some kind of strange wind? Every step he took was steady and firm. Body of diamond showed its might, so naturally he was as unmovable, indestructible, and eternal as diamond. The second round is to collect stones, and the more the better. However, as long as I can reach the goal in 3 days' time, I will be able to qualify for the second test, so being a little late would be all right, just enough to allow others time to pick up stones, and I would only have to snatch them away. On the path of cultivation, contest is naturally inevitable. In fact, I am quite intrigued by the airstreams that have appeared here. There should be some kind of array here, which is the only thing that can produce such conditions. If I were able to obtain the formation's eyes, that would be rather nice. It's decided. Ling Han, bringing with him 2 beauties, one big one and another small, went off in search of the formation's eyes. There were no spiritual herbs of any kind on the 3 mountains, merely an area of very ordinary forest. Thus, everyone merely concentrated on their journey, as there was no need to be distracted here. When they saw Ling Han carrying 2 girls, looking extremely relaxed, they were all naturally dumbfounded. Since they were trapped in an array, they could naturally feel how powerful the air streams in this place were. The winds here were so strong that they felt like they were mere mortals who had walked into a frosty land with terrible conditions. Every step they took seemed to be incomparably difficult. But just take a look at Ling Han. He had 2 people in his arms, yet could still walk so easily. Under such a comparison, they really felt like breaking out into tears. You shouldn't strike such a blow on their fragile hearts like that. Wenren Qian, Zhao Ziyuan, and other such super prodigies also saw this, and they all could not help but look surprised. They were all very conceited, although they had not obtained the invitation to enroll directly in the Restore Heaven Academy. They were all confident in their own abilities. The reason why they had not gotten an invitation was merely because they had kept too much of a low profile in the past. This time they had all decided to become famous with a single feat, but they had yet to shock anyone with their outstanding prowess when they themselves were shocked first. This person should have cultivated some cultivation technique that is earth-aligned and focuses on strength, which must be why his center is so firm. Wenren Qian and the other prodigies all thought, sweeping aside the stray thoughts in their heads. This test seemed to have been fitted precisely for Ling Han. Therefore, it was all right even if they could not compare with him in this round. Who in this world was absolutely perfect and without flaws? Ling Han could not care less about the others. He journeyed all over the mountainous terrain, and finally, in the extreme outer areas of the mountain forest, discovered the first formation's eye. It was a flag which was only about 3 meters tall. Its flagpole was made from a completely black metal, and there were multiple patterns etched on it. The flag that fluttered in the wind was nothing ordinary either, but there were no array patterns on it. Instead, there was only a winged lion that was baring its claws and teeth. Ling Han was surprised. The array patterns were naturally etched on the flagpole, but the flag was not mere decoration either. On the other hand, it was a key feature of the array. Unfortunately, Ling Han had yet to comprehend the amazing mysteries behind it. "This lion looks like it's alive," Hunyo exclaimed, pointing at the flag. "And it's actually breathing in and out. So fun." Realization dawned on Ling Han. The array patterns were used to collect power from nature, and this flag was to turn this power into real winds that blew towards the mountain forest, which could be the only way the haphazard, strange winds were formed. "What a good item, it's mine." Ling Han stretched out a hand to pull out the flag, but immediately a lion's roar echoed. The lion on the flag actually took form and became a fierce lion that was 150 meters in size. As its wings flapped, a powerful wind was produced. "Little lion, be good and come into my bowl." Hunyo, meanwhile, had brought out various pots and pans and was currently salivating. Though it is not a real living creature, it has nurtured a sliver of bloodline and divine strength of a winged lion. After Ling Han studied it for a few moments, he looked surprised. This lion was formed by the spiritual qi that the array flag had gathered from the surrounding environment. But there was actually a sliver of the bloodline that had been left behind by the winged lion when it had been alive. This allowed it to be filled with life, just as if it was a real living creature. It should have been drawn with the blood of a winged lion, only that could result upon realization in such a lifelike winged lion as if there was a real demonic beast crouching in front of them. It was no wonder that Hunyo would drool foolishly when she saw it. "Right, then I'll suppress you first," Ling Han declared with a smile, and delivered an attack in the winged lion's direction. He was really too powerful, as he had formed Sword Ray and had achieved minor accomplishment level in Body of Lightning, as well as having an indestructible physique from Body of Diamond. Even if he did not use any mystical power, his battle prowess had reached the peak level of the spiritual infant tier, and even deity transformation tier cultivators would find it difficult to injure him. The winged lion only had the battle prowess of a cultivator at the peak of the spiritual infant tier. So what could it do against Ling Han? Xiao, 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 xiao. The winged lion kept up a barrage of wind blades. They possessed very powerful destructive power, and the dense patterns were incredibly terrifying. But Ling Han couldn't even bother to dodge them. He allowed the wind blades to hit him, but they merely sliced apart the clothes on his body and were completely incapable of piercing his skin at all. They merely left behind a few white traces on it. Little lion, just obediently obey my will. Ling Han laughed loudly. He drew out a finger, and Sword Ray came into being, slicing towards the winged lion. Pooh! Instantly, the Sword Ray sliced the winged lion into two halves. It was formed out of spiritual qi, so there was naturally no spurting blood. The two halves of its body moved with great difficulty, trying to fuse back into one, but it was a pointless struggle as it was impossible to achieve. This was the power of Ray. Its destructive power reached bone deep. Even if the attack had been delivered, destruction was still ongoing. Big Brother Han, you are becoming more and more powerful. Zhu Xian Er's beautiful eyes lit up. The more powerful the man that she loved was, naturally the happier she would be. Ling Han raised a hand and gave a pat on her asterisk and said, "Don't keep tempting me." Her words were much too ambiguous, causing his thoughts to veer in an unspeakable direction, and he could not help his heart from throbbing wildly. Zhu Xian'er moaned, and it was as if her entire person had turned into a pool of water, soft and sweet, breathtakingly beautiful. Hu Niu was upset and crossed her arms over her chest, her little mouth pouting. Ling Han made another attempt to pull out the flag. This time, there was no winged lion pouncing out to stop him. He pulled out the flag, and the power of the strange winds in this mountain forest instantly weakened considerably. There wasn't only one array flag here, but there couldn't be that many either. Thus, merely pulling out flag would produce a great influence. This flag is not too bad. Xian'er, I'm handing it over to you. Ling Han threw the flag directly to Zhu Xian'er. It was not of much use to him. Zhu Xian'er was very happy. As long as if was something that Ling Han had given her, she would be happy no matter what it was. Niu wants too. Niu was very unhappy. Then let's go and get another flag, Ling Han said, smiling. Only then did Niu's anger turn into pleasure. She was a kid, after all. She'd be happy with just a little coaxing. Less than half a day later, they found the second array flag. After Ling Han had taken it, he tossed it over to Niu, making the little girl very happy for a while. However, after playing with it for a while, she felt there was nothing fun about it, and threw it onto the ground, no longer interested. Zhu Xian'er picked it up off the ground. This flag was filled with suppression abilities for any ordinary spiritual infant tier cultivator, and if they had been in the North region, that was practically impossible to deal with. The three of them continued their sweep, and would take any flag they came across to make some easy money. Why have the power of the strange winds decreased suddenly? You're right. Furthermore, they are also changing directions less often. This time I am sure I will be able to reach Ghost Lock Ravine in 3 days' time. After Ling Han had pulled out a few array flags in a row, the most direct result was the great decline of the difficulty of the test. If the higher-ups of the Restore Heaven Academy knew of it, their faces would probably turn green. Chapter 660, Ghost Lock Ravine. Chapter 660, Ghost Lock Ravine. Henyi. Ling Han had done it deliberately. The 5 ancient great sects were so despicable, so Ling Han would naturally be happy to give them some trouble. Moreover, the more people enrolled into the Restore Heaven Academy, the more parties would Ling Han be able to persuade into joining his camp. His goal was to establish a great empire and unite the whole realm. Thus, he would naturally not mind it if some parties were stronger or some parties were weaker. Who cares? I'm merely here to conquer. Yet Ling Han did not dare go too far, either. Otherwise, he would become a target of the Restore Heaven Academy. Now he could only act secretly, and once he had done what he wanted, he'd just run, and no one would know that it was him. After pulling out a total of 20 array flags, Ling Han, Zhu Xian'er, and Hunyo finally set off towards Ghost Lock Ravine. When they arrived, it was already the second night, and there had long since been others who had entered ahead of them and began the second test in advance. Only those who entered here in 3 days' time would be qualified to enroll in the academy, and consecutively whoever obtained the biggest number of stones, the most attention they would obtain from the academy. Hunyo, let's go robbing. Ling Han laughed. En. Hunyo nodded crisply, instantly energized. Stuff like robbing was her favorite activity. Zhu Xian'er merely smiled and looked at Ling Han tenderly. First and second brothers should have arrived long ago, Ling Han said. I wonder how good their harvest is. They journeyed in this ravine, yet saw wisps of fog enshrouding all their surroundings, making for a very spooky atmosphere. No wonder it had the name Ghost Lock Ravine. Ling Han! Ling Han! A call echoed behind them, and they turned to see Qin Lian Yu had caught up with them. Her bountiful asterisk danced with her movements, like waves surging forth, looking very majestic. Oh, what a coincidence! Ling Han waved. Hadn't you all long since run ahead of me? Why have you arrived just a little earlier than me? Qin Lian Yu was very confused. The scenery on the way was not too bad, so I spent some additional time to admire it, Ling Han said. Qin Lian Yu rolled her beautiful eyes. This was definitely a lie. If she actually believed him, there would definitely be something wrong with her. However, her attention was soon drawn to the ravine, and she said, I heard that there really are evil ghosts sealed within this Ghost Lock Ravine. Really? Zhu Xian'er asked immediately, very curious. Of course it's real. It's rumored that it's an old evil ghost that is millennia old, terrifyingly violent and cruel. Qin Lian Yu described vividly, frightening and dazing Zhu Xian'er. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Even shattering void tier cultivators only have a lifespan of over 1,000 years. What kind of old evil ghost is that amazing that it can live for several millennia? TSK, you don't understand. How could ghosts be the same as human beings? Qin Lian, you said disdainfully. What's the difference? Ling Han asked with a smile. How could Qin Lian you actually point out the differences? She could only retort, I am not a ghost, so how would I know? Ling Han made no further jokes and said, However, if there really were ghosts here, I really would like to take a look. Nyo wants to see too. Hunyo followed Ling Han's lead. What's there to see about ghosts? Qin Lian Yu immediately shook her head. Zhu Xian'er also expressed her deep agreement. Girls feared this kind of thing the most. They advanced, and soon they spotted Li Fengyu and his sister. That guy was really quite thick-skinned, forcing his way into their group, and formed a small team with Ling Han and the others. This place is so spooky, there can't really be ghosts here, right? Li Fengyu asked. Hey, don't such inauspicious things, everyone else exclaimed, feeling their hair standing on ends just from listening to him. The further they walked, the darker their surroundings became, as if it had become a ghostly zone. What's that? Li Zixian asked, pointing ahead. A bone. Hunyo's eyes were sharp. The group walked forwards and saw that there was indeed a bone on the ground. They did not know whether it belonged to an animal or a human, or how long the owner had been dead for, but they could still see the bone glowing as if it was a piece of treasure. This is a human bone, Qin Lian Yu said with absolute certainty. Ling Han nodded. This was indeed a human bone. When the owner had been alive, he must have been very powerful, because there were patterns left behind on the bone that formed some kind of inheritance. Now, these patterns were more or less worn away, but one could still how powerful it had once been. No existence could fight off the erosion of time. He felt very rueful. To be capable of forming patterns on even one's bones would require the cultivation level of the heaven tier at the very least. But so what? A few centuries and a few millennia later, all that was left behind was a pile of bones, and even the bones themselves would deteriorate before completely disappearing from the world. The bones seems to be shining. Li Fengyu was very curious and was just about to dig the bone out, but his hand had just touched the bone when an incredibly bright, powerful flash of light appeared. Pung! He was instantly sent flying. Everyone was stunned. Was this the rise of the dead? But how was a dead corpse that had died who knew how many years ago, and whose bone patterns were almost worn away to nothing, supposed to rise? Ka 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 ka. The ground split open. Pung! A skeletal hand stretched out, followed by the second one. Then they saw a skeleton crawl out of the dirt, and in its chest was a stone that was glowing with light. Wasn't that the stone they were supposed to fight over? Realization dawned on them. The secret to this skeleton being able to move even after death was this stone. It seemed to have turned the skeleton into a puppet and caused it to move under its control. The skeleton exuded a powerful aura. Its cultivation level had, after all, been extremely high when it had still been alive. Even if its bone patterns were almost worn away to nothing after death, it was still overwhelmingly powerful. Peak of the spiritual infant tier. They all nodded. Charge! Hunyo charged out and engaged the skeleton in a fierce battle. This skeleton was really very strong. Its bones were protected by the patterns and were thus incredibly hard. The strange stone was the source of its strength, allowing it to display battle prowess on the level of the peak of the spiritual infant tier. Theoretically, this skeleton was definitely not something that could be beaten by a cultivator in the spiritual infant tier, because in terms of defense it was unbeatable. However, since the source of its energy was the stone in its chest, then one only had to remove the stone, and it would naturally be reduced to a perfectly normal pile of bones. This design made it extremely difficult to get a hold of the strange stone, but it was not completely impossible. Yet, Hunyo did not bother at all, and completely ignored the presence of the stone. Instead, she clashed against the skeleton endlessly with pung, pung, pung sounds. Zizizi! She used the power of lightning, and after every attack, the skeleton would shiver as if it was soon about to collapse and shatter. Everyone was dumbfounded. This little girl was really a violent maniac. She actually wanted to forcefully kill a skeleton that, to them, seemed impossible to kill in a head-on confrontation. They were all flushed as well, for they felt like they couldn't even match a little girl. After over a dozen moves, this skeleton monster was forcefully shattered apart by Hunyo. The little girl picked up the stone and scampered back to hand it over to Linghan. After getting a praising pat on the head from Linghan, she happily beamed with joy. How easily coaxed! Everyone else felt rueful over Linghan's good fortune. He had actually managed to pick up such a powerful little girl as his loyal thug. It seemed like their luck was quite good. After walking for a while, they again found a bone on a spot, and when they came closer, indeed, another skeleton crawled out of the ground. There was a strange, shining stone in its chest. This time, Linghan attacked and charged towards the skeleton. He attacked head-on as well, and did not have the slightest intention of a diversionary strategy at all, causing those who saw him grab their heads and declare him a monster in their shock. Chapter 661, Snatching Stones. Chapter 661, Snatching Stones. Henyi. Everyone felt speechless. An enemy they'd originally thought could only be dealt with using a roundabout strategy, but both Linghan and Hunyo chose a frontal strategy. Furthermore, it wasn't a rash move to show their superior might, either, as their terrifying power was right there for them to see. Linghan wielded his finger like he was brandishing a sword and delivered a slash in the direction of the skeleton monster. Xiao, 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 xiao. Sword ray swiftly slashed forth, accompanied by bright white lightning. The power of lightning had greatly increased the power of sword ray. One had to understand that the thunderclap ninth heaven was a mystical power, and Linghan had reached minor accomplishment level in body of lightning. How could it not be powerful? The The skeleton monster shook wildly from the electrocution, and the multiple flashes of sword ray sliced it repeatedly, leaving behind many slash marks on its bones. In theory, this kind of monster was definitely not something that could be injured by a spiritual infant tier cultivator. But who asked Ling Han's battle prowess to have exceeded the level of the spiritual infant tier? Sword ray together with thunderclap, ninth heaven, his current battle prowess was worth 1 star of the deity transformation tier at least. Similarly, after a dozen over moves, the skeleton was slashed to bits by Ling Han and returned once again to the dirt from whence it came. Rest in peace, Ling Han said internally, feeling slightly displeased because the Restore Heaven Academy actually used the corpses of powerful cultivators who had died who knew how many years ago as tools from a certain aspect. What difference was there between them and the 1,000 Corpse sect? Thinking about it closely, there really was not much difference between the two. The 1,000 Corpse sect wanted to turn all the people of a whole realm into corpse soldiers, whereas the 5 great sects wanted to refine them all into an alchemical pill. They both wanted to destroy all life, so which one of them could declare themselves nobler? They were birds of the same feather. Ling Han picked up the strange stone. Indeed, it could not be stored away into the Black Tower or a spatial ring. It seemed like it had a life and will of its own. With a thought, he summoned the rock spirit and tossed the strange stone over to it. The rock spirit sniffed it for a while before suddenly opening its mouth widely. With a crack, it had swallowed the strange stone and began to chew on it noisily like how a human being would chew on a bone. The sound caused the others to feel a soreness in their gums. That could actually be chewed on. Ling Han, why did you destroy the strange stone? Qin Lian, you gasped in shock after momentary shock. That's right. That is something that could help you become a core disciple, Li Zixian said. Ling Han smiled softly and said, it's all right. Anyways, there's more of it, so we'll just take things slow. The rock spirit would only eat stones that could increase its power, since it was fond of eating it. That proved that this stone was of use to it. After the rock spirit finished eating, it leaned against Ling Han's leg and rubbed its head against him like it was a little puppy. But its strength was really too tremendous. One rub was enough to shake even the earth itself, which was incredibly terrifying. Thankfully, Ling Han had cultivated the indestructible Heaven Scroll and possessed amazing strength himself. If not, with the rock spirit rubbing against him like that, he would have been sent flying, his bones and flesh shattered from the impact. Everyone else inhaled sharply. This puppet was very intelligent. It would actually take the initiative to play cute. Furthermore, that strength was really terrifyingly powerful. The rock spirit stared at Ling Han pitifully, its mouth open wide. If it was a human being, it would most probably be salivating by now. Ling Han knew that this guy was remembering that brick, but that brick had disappeared along with Hellion Sun Shui. Even he could not find it. He did not know what had happened, that sea girl would actually leave without a word. Here, I'll give you this too. He threw the other strange stone over to the rock spirit as well. The rock spirit grabbed it and immediately began chewing. Though this was completely incomparable to the brick, but every little bit counted. It was a waste to refuse when Ling Han had given the strange stone to it. A thought flashed in Ling Han's mind. Since the first floor of the Black Tower was the source of earth, then could it nurture some kind of supreme strange stone to help the rock spirit increase its power? He immediately communicated with Small Tower and voiced the question with his divine sense. Yes. Small Tower replied crisply. Ling Han felt a bit like he was about to go crazy and asked, Then why didn't you tell me earlier? You didn't ask, Small Tower answered calmly. Ling Han felt a violent urge to beat someone up and said, Fine then. Then give me a few hundred or a few thousand stones. If Small Tower actually had eyes, it would definitely roll its eyes at Ling Han. It gave a humph and said, Black Tower is still being restored, so how could there be so much chaos power to be expended? It can only supply a single stone every month or so. 1 stone per month, then. It was better than nothing. Then how are the effects? Ling Han asked. After eating 3, that rock man can break through to the spiritual infant tier. After 6, it can break through to the deity transformation tier, Small Tower replied calmly. Fuck, so awesome. Ling Han could not help but feel depressed. He worked so hard at his cultivation, but the rock spirit need only to eat a few stones and its cultivation level would gradually soar. Such a comparison could really drive him to a death by anger. Since it was so easy for the rock spirit to raise its level, Ling Han did not plan to feed strange stones to the big guy anymore. He laughed and said, "Since you're full, then do your work responsibly." The rock spirit pounded on its chest like a rampaging gorilla. Everyone once again clicked their tongues in wonder. This puppet was really too human in behavior. They continued their way, and soon they again spotted white bones buried underneath the ground. This time, there weren't that few in number either. They crawled out from underground and charged to attack Ling Han and the others. They all used their respective strengths and began to add credit to themselves. However, the skeleton monsters were really too powerful. A spiritual infant tier cultivator would still have a chance with a roundabout strategy to take advantage of an opening to remove the strange stone. But flower blossom tier cultivators would not even have the opportunity to get near to it, as they would soon be sent flying away by the terrifying aura. The first round was still all right. Even though spiritual infant tier cultivators were powerful, the strange winds they suffered were even more powerful, and did not allow them too much of an advantage over their flower blossom tier peers. But here, the power advantage that spiritual infant tier cultivators had could be seen in full. After all, the first test was to pick those young men and women with good talent and strong determination. But this test was to pick out the geniuses among geniuses, so naturally only the cream of the crop would be able to charge out of the ranks. The rock spirit took the position of vanguard and charged to attack those skeleton monsters. Yet it had just charged out when it was sent flying with a single punch and shattered into a pile of rubble. Thankfully, its core was not broken and it soon revived. "AI, you are really undependable." Ling Han shot out himself, and Hunyeo gave an excited shout as well before joining forces with Ling Han. The two great monsters now attacked together, and even the skeleton monsters could only bear their resentment. Within a few moves, they were shattered by their combined attacks, and the strange stones instantly dropped onto the ground. This thing could not be stored away into the Black Tower, and could only be kept on one's body, which made Ling Han very displeased as this seriously affected his image. Thankfully, this stone was only the size of his fist, otherwise he would really go crazy. After half a day, he already had over 20 stones on him. Even though the light exuding from the strange stones was not too powerful, with 20 of them together, it still made for a grand scene. They made him seem almost like a light source, which illuminated brightly this gloomy and dark place completely. But this also made Ling Han into a live target. Soon, someone made a move against him, wanting to snatch away the stones, but the result was naturally that they were looted by Ling Han instead. Not only were the strange stones they had seized, even their spatial rings were taken and given to Ling Han as gifts. One day later, they all stopped to rest and took out ingredients to cook. Suddenly, a young man dressed in green-colored robes appeared, an arrogant expression on his face as he coldly declared to the group, "Leave the strange stones behind, and you all can get lost." Chapter 662, Yuan Chenghe. Chapter 662, Yuan Chenghe. Heni, Yuan Chenghe. Li Fengyu and Li Zixian both cried out in alarm simultaneously. "Haha, since you know who I am, why don't you scramble?" the young man in tight attire said with a sneer. Looking at the somewhat perplexed expression on Ling Han's face, Qing Lianyu explained, "Yuan Chenghe, a disciple of the magnificent Cloud sect, just like Wenren Qianqian, had been in secluded cultivation while rigorously cultivating. None have heard about him before. However, in recent times he had suddenly appeared out of nowhere and defeated quite a number of veterans from the spiritual infant tier. His strength is really formidable. Some have even compared him to be the equal of the likes of Yao Huiyu and the small Saber King. Ling Han shook his head and remarked, "The small Saber King and Lang Yatian are both already nearing their 40s. How old is Yao Huiyu? They are clearly of two different generations. How could they be placed on the same level to compare? However, I doubt that this guy could be stronger than Yao Huiyu. What are you still whispering and muttering about?" "Yuan Cheng," he snapped, his voice laced with annoyance. Aware of his mighty reputation though they were, why did they not get lost? Li Fengyu said in a low voice, "I shall catch his attention and distract him while all of you leave first." He immediately transformed his face into a smiling expression and scampered over towards Yuan Chenghe. "Big Brother Yuan, I am Li Fengyu. I have long heard of Big Brother Yuan's mighty reputation. It is my good fortune and honor to finally meet you today. As expected, Brother Yuan has an awe-inspiring presence and could exude a golden brilliance just by merely standing there. The shine cast upon the innermost being of a little brother like me makes me feel as if there is another red sun in my life, guiding me on the direction of my path." His unending torrent of praises made Ling Han and the others stare at him in embarrassment upon hearing it. There was actually someone who could utter nauseating words in such a smooth manner without getting flushed at all unlike them. Hordy felt almost like throwing up. The fact was, Yuan Cheng, he was enjoying the compliments very much. His natural talent was alarmingly superior, yet he had previously been in secluded cultivation rigorously cultivating, and as such was isolated from the rest of the world, being akin to an ascetic monk. Still, his innermost being was actually of unparalleled arrogance, and yearned for the acknowledgement, worship, and adoration of others. Recently, at long last he became resplendent, and the vanity of his innermost being also naturally swelled all of a sudden. At this moment, being bootlicked by Li Fengyu immediately made every single compliment shoot straight into his bones, which left him feeling smug, and of course he would not consider the words to be nauseating in the least. After the incessant chatter, Li Fengyu felt his mouth had run dry. He then turned his head around, and saw that everyone's line of sight was centered on him while their mouths were gaping open. He couldn't help but voice out impatiently, "I am already running out of words to say here, and had intended to repeat it once again from the beginning. Why haven't the lot of you flee?" Ling Han bellowed out a hearty laugh and responded, "Isn't this to see to what extent you could sing the praises?" He now had the confidence to even defeat the small Saber King under his sword. Was there any need to bolt just because of some rumors of Yuan Chenghe? What a joke! Yuan Cheng, he reacted abruptly. He couldn't help but reveal his indignation as he exclaimed with rage, "You're good! You actually dare to hoodwink me!" Li Fengyu was scared out of his wits, and promptly took to his heels. Although he was also a genius, he was nowhere near the level of Yuan Chenghe. Furthermore, he was even falling short by a whole cultivation tier. How would he dare to fight? "Brotherling, show your strength," he shouted. "You hateful guy! I want to kill, I want to thrash you!" Yuan Chenghe roared. He originally intended to say that he wanted to slaughter the other party, but this test strictly prohibited any killing. He would not want to be disqualified from entering the Restore Heaven Academy just because of this. "Brotherling, take care of this fellow, and I will gift you my sister as wife," Li Fengyu shouted again. "Brother!" Li Zixian rebuked with a red face. How could he say such things? Wasn't it like betraying her already? Ling Han would not want this ugly woman. Hunyeo charged forward in Ling Han's stead, not allowing Ling Han the opportunity to make a move. She transformed into lightning, and with a flash, appeared in front of Yuan Chenghe. Her small fist struck out towards him in an attack. Yuan Cheng, he was startled. It never occurred to him that a wisp of a girl could actually have such speed, and even more so he would not have thought that she was of the same cultivation level as him. This was a hard blow to his confidence. He had always been very proud of his cultivation level. 27 years old and already in the spiritual infant-tier was an unprecedented feat, yet now, a little girl of 7 to 8 years of age was impressively also at the spiritual infant-tier. So what was there to take pride in? Clang! He drew out a treasured sword, but did not unsheath it, and only used the scabbard to block Hunyo's oncoming fist. But the lightning surged through the scabbard and spread towards his arm. Hum! He gave a light humph. There were flames roving on his body which intensely collided with the onslaught of lightning. The martial intent transformed into dazzling rays of light as it mingled in the air and took different forms and shapes. Hunyo agilely leapt into the air and somersaulted before retreating. Ling Han nodded his head. No wonder this person could be compared in strength with Yao Huiyu. He was indeed very strong, given that he could firmly withstand a blow from Hunyo and not fall into a disadvantage. Not many at the spiritual infant-tier could achieve such a feat. Little did they know, Yuancheng, he was actually even more taken aback. He was immensely conceited, thinking that even those in Yao Huiyu and the small Saber King's class were no match against him. He had come to restore Heaven Academy to begin his legendary journey. Who would have guessed that had yet to enter the academy, and here randomly emerged a little girl who was already capable to fight him and be his equal in power. Although he did not use any ultimate techniques, but an expert could tell whether another had real ability once he made his move, and this little girl was not to be underestimated. Ugly, come and chase after Nyo. Hunyo provoked while clapping her hands. Yuancheng, he grunted, and unsheathed his sword. He then called out, "The lot of you intend to let a little girl to fight for you. Humph, you have the nerve." Ling Han laughed as he countered, "You could not even defeat the youngest in our midst. Yet you still want to challenge the others? You should thank us that we did not bully you, and just casually sent a little girl to play with you." These words were really Fatinga, little girl of 7 to 8 years old, could definitely be deemed as casually playing. Even if he were to tell others, who would believe that this little girl was a skillful master of the spiritual infant-tier. Yuancheng, he could not refute Ling Han's words. As such, he had no other choice but to hide his gloom inwardly. Who told him to encounter such a monster? "Hunyo, strike him down. I want to take him in as lackey," Ling Han said as he snickered. "Okay." Hunyo replied in a clear and crisp voice. "Just leave it to Nyo." Damn it! Yuancheng, he flew into a rage as soon as he heard it. He had the delusion of subduing him to become his lackey and treat him like any other small fry. He unsheathed his sword at once and charged in Ling Han's direction. "Your opponent is Nyo." Hunyo's figure nimbly fleeted in midair and then appeared in front of Yuancheng, her small fist aimed directly at his face. Yuancheng, he had no choice but to tilt his head to one side to dodge the blow, at the same time thrusting his sword forward towards Hunyo. This could possibly be a formidable adversary who was not the slightest bit inferior to himself. How would he dare to allow his opponent to unrestrainedly strike him with blows? He could probably end up being hit to the extent that even this mother would not recognize him. The duo engaged in combat, thereupon launching into a battle in full swing right away. Yuancheng, he was indeed of great strength, being able to face Hunyo head-on. At least, he did not look like he would be defeated any time soon. The onlookers clicked their tongues in wonder, and did not withhold their praise of his ability. One had to know that before this, even the skeleton monsters were toppled by Hunyo in a frontal attack. Yet Yuancheng, he didn't know of it, and only heard what they said on the surface. So he felt exceedingly awkward. He had actually been reduced to such a sorry state that he could only be equal with a little girl. Ah! He let out a big howl. He was finally able to execute his ultimate technique. Amid the motions of his sword style, he appeared to have become a sword top rapidly swirling, slicing towards Hunyo. Over 20 flashes of sword chi swept over. It was fearful to the extreme. Chapter 663, Beaten into a Pig's Head. Chapter 663, Beaten into a Pig's Head. Henyi. Interesting. Ling Han nodded his head. There was a maximum limit to the sword chi that a cultivator could form only 30 flashes of sword chi at most. The physical strength was also limited, and the number of sword strikes that could be delivered by twisting the wrist in a split second similarly had an upper limit. However, after the fusion of sword and body, Yuan Qing's entire body moved, which, as a matter of fact, heightened greatly the might of his sword style. Originally, the strain was on the wrist, but now the whole body had actually blended in, so it had naturally reduced the burden on the wrist, which increased the frequency with which he could deliver sword strikes. Shadows of tens and thousands of swords simultaneously attacked, in addition to the sword chi. The force it emanated was alarming. Don't want to play with you anymore. With a xiao, Hunyao transformed into lightning and dodged, moving at a remarkably swift speed. Even the blade of the sword could not catch up to her. Yuan Cheng, he felt helpless. His sword style was exceptionally powerful, yet if it could not even hit the target, then what was the point? Encountering a quick opponent like Hunyao, he felt dispirited, not knowing where he should attack. He fixed his eyes on Ling Han, then muttered to himself, "This guy would not also move as swiftly, would he? Fight me." He lunged over in Ling Han's direction, since he was the one carrying the strange stones with him. "Niao has returned again." Hunyao yelled, and true to her words, she came storming back over, with her clenched fist poised to strike. Electric currents sparked rampantly as she sent her attack in the direction of Yuan Cheng. He's back. Yuan Cheng, he had no choice but to counter the attack, and he could no longer continue his course to attack Ling Han. Every time, as soon as he used his ultimate technique, Hunyao would scamper off in a run. But, afterwards, she'd then promptly return yet again to attack, determinately pestering Yuan Cheng, and making him lose his temper completely. "Little girl, don't run off if you have the guts." Yuan Cheng, he could not refrain from challenging Hunyao. He was fuming with anger at her antics. "Fine, I will stop running. You think Niao is afraid of you?" Hunyao retorted, sticking out both her hands on her waist in a fearless stance. "Ugly people are always up to no good. See how Niao will finish you off." Yuan Cheng, he exulted on seeing this chance, and he leaped over his sword aimed to strike, charging to attack Hunyao. "Niao is leaving." Hunyao jeered as she ran off once again. Yuan Cheng, his attack naturally fell short again. Angry to the extreme, he laughed and exclaimed, "Going back on your words." He had only just started when he found he could not continue on with his words. How old was she? "Ha ha ha ha, you're so dumb, ugly guy. Niao is only teasing you." Hunyao laughed gleefully while she pushed up her sleeves and boldly stated, "Fine then, this time I will be serious and beat you into submission." How would Yuan Cheng, he fall from the same trick again? He was one of the prodigies of this generation, not a fool. Niao's ultimate technique is unparalleled and absolutely invincible. Anyone who sees it would be fearful. Any ghost who sees it is frightened by it. Super Tyrant Dragon Claws. Hunyao leapt out with both her hands formed into claws, aiming at Yuan Cheng, his chest. This time it was for real. Yuan Cheng, he was stunned, and hastily raised his sword in a slicing arc towards Hunyao. An immeasurable force burst forth, while more than 20 flashes of sword chi swept over, creating a breathtaking view amidst the vast sky. A terrifying collision created a small-sized mushroom cloud, while the shock wave from the clash forced away the fog in the surrounding, revealing bare earth. Fortunately, the whole ravine was practically barren with only bits and pieces of rocks. If not, this strike would surely have caused a great number of trees to suffer. Hit, 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 hit. Hunyao's excited yell could be heard from amid all the dust. As the dust dispersed and the scene within lay clearly visible, it became apparent that Hunyo has already attained the complete upper hand and was on the offense, hitting Yuan Cheng as she held him down, time and again striking him hard on his chest, hands, and face. Yuan Cheng's face, which had been perfectly fine a moment ago, was now already deformed, the swelling akin to a pig's head, with bruises of green and purple all over, and looked very comical. Everyone cried out in shock. Hunyo was really too fierce even Yuan Cheng. He was defeated in this little girl's hand. Pung! Hunyo landed another kick, which sent Yuan Cheng flying. He glided to a stop just right beside Ling Han's feet. Ling Han crouched down and laughingly asked, "Now, do you concede?" "No, I don't." Yuan Cheng, he snapped back with his head held high. He naturally would not concede. How would he be willing to be defeated by a little girl? "Then you can go on and continue being beaten." Ling Han also gave him a kick. Yuan Cheng, he reflexively propped up both his arms to shield his handsome pig's face. Bang, he was sent flying back by Ling Han's kick, while Hunyo rushed forth, and the fight started again. Bang, bang, bang. After merely a few rounds, Yuan Cheng, he was yet again kicked and sent gliding back to Ling Han's feet once more. "So how is it? Still not conceding defeat?" Ling Han asked in amusement. "Of course not." Yuan Cheng, his character was quite unyielding. "Then go again." Ling Han once again sent Yuan Cheng out with a kick. Gliding here and there, Yuan Cheng, he was being treated like a ball being tossed around, revolving to and fro between Ling Han and Hunyo. Qing Lian Yu and the others hissed. That was none other than Yuan Cheng the one reputed to be able to challenge Yao Hui Yu, Small Saber King, and the likes of them. Yet now he was actually being beaten to a state that he wouldn't even be able to tell which way north was. What a wimp! Not knowing how many rounds it had been, Yuan Cheng, he once again glided to Ling Han's feet. This time, Ling Han did not even bother asking, and was in the motion of raising his feet to kick him and send him flying back when, much to his surprise, Yuan Cheng, he actually shouted, "Concede, I concede!" Bang, he was still sent flying back. Sorry, I got used to kicking you back," Ling Han promptly exclaimed with a laugh. What a fuck asterisk lack of sincerity. Yuan Cheng, he was swearing internally, and only managed to say one line before he was again being hit by Hunyo's fist. Amidst the onslaught of fist after violent fist, he ended up lying at Ling Han's feet yet again. This time round, Ling Han at last did not kick him again. Instead, he was smiling as he remarked, "Since you have conceded, then come show your respects to your big brother." Yuan Cheng, he got up, got his breath back, and said, "It was that little girl who defeated me. So unless you could show me strength that could make me concede, I would rather die than submit." "Not submitting." Ling Han smiled. "Don't act steadfast with me. Even if you were straight, I could also make Li Feng you, that blabbermouth, ramble away at you to make you bend. I've finally realized that you're the type that naturally wants to be beaten. All right, then, I'll just give you another beating." Hunyo ceased her onslaught of blows and stood by the side with her arms crossed over her chest while enjoying the exciting exchange. With an indifferent expression, Yuan Cheng, he spoke up. "As long as you can defeat me, only then will I acknowledge you as my boss." Ling Han gave the word some thought. Then, with his left hand behind his back, he remarked, "How about this? I will fight you with only one hand, lest it is said that I bully you." What arrogance! Yuan Cheng, he humphed. If Ling Han could really defeat him unarmed single-handedly, then he would accept the inevitable and truly acknowledge him as his boss. He raised his sword to level while he uttered, "Then come face my 7 swords descend mountain e'en." Boom! A wave of energy gushed forth and emanated from within his body, causing billows of dust, forming a ring which undulated in all directions. He was building up force. The power of this strike was definitely unparalleled. Ling Han did not rush to attack, either. If he were to subdue this genius, then he certainly had to do it such that he was genuinely convinced. 7 swords descend Yin Mountain. Yuan Cheng, he delivered a strike. The first style, mountains exhaust and streams end. Rays of light bounced off the sword's blade and spilled forth, while the sword's energy encircled and besieged the target. One after another, again and again. The rays from the sword were all over the place. To be enveloped and wrapped in the sword's rays would definitely be mountain and river exhausted. Using his arm as a sword, Ling Han charged towards the opposing party. Sword intent flowed forth, making one feel that it was definitely an ultimate treasured sword without precedent. How ignorant! Seeing that Ling Han was actually intending to use his arm to block his treasured sword, Yuan Cheng, he could not refrain from giving a snort. Was he planning to seek his own death? Chapter 664, Subdued. Chapter 664, Subdued. Reverie underscore. Henyi. Ding. Ling Han's arm collided with the treasured sword. Origin power ripples clearly couldn't be seen, yet a chain of sparks burst as if 2 metal weapons were clashing. Yuan Cheng, he was immediately dumbfounded. You dang weirdo, you're actually able to resist 7th tier spirit tool head-on. How can your body be so hard? He cried out. If I'm not a bit kick-ass, how can I be your boss? Ling Han said with a smile. You really got full of it. Yuan Cheng, he snorted. I admit that your physical body is extremely hard, but that's all it is. To defeat me, that alone won't be enough. Ling Han smiled slightly and said, You've got so much superfluous talk. Got to change it in the future. I like people that prefer action over words. Dream on. Yuan Cheng, he shouted and raised his long sword. 7 swords descend Mountain Yin. The second style, unleashing a horde of ghosts. Xiao, 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 with fierce sword shadows. Evil ghosts appeared from thin air and charged towards Ling Han. Oh, so it also has the effect of confusing the divine sense. Ling Han snorted lightly and used his arm like a long sword to strike, causing sword lights to fly, all-conquering. He cultivated diamond body, and his physique was comparable to rare metal 1 tier higher in toughness. This meant that his arm was no different from a treasured sword forged from 8th tier rare metal, and the hand was part of him. The vein-like lines naturally interwove in every inch of his blood and flesh, more like a spirit tool than a spirit tool. One with the sword strike, the power of it was heaven-shaking. Pung! Yuan Cheng, he was instantly struck flying, and his entire body trembled violently. That was because Ling Han used the thunderclap, ninth heaven, which made him numb all over. How about it? Convinced yet? Ling Han said with a smile. Yuan Cheng, he was already half convinced. The opponent was definitely an expert in sword techniques. This sword ray could already prove it, but Ling Han used his arm as a sword and was still able to fend off his ultimate move. This strength was obviously above his. However, he was still unwilling to admit defeat like this. His immersing diligently in cultivation for so many years was not so that he'd accept some boss. I'm not convinced. Yuan Cheng, he said with a straightened neck, and raised his long sword again. 7 swords descend Mountain Yin. The third style, a Yin mountain locks ghosts. Ling Hang laughed loudly, and with a flash he turned into lightning, weaving in between the opponent's sword chi. Arriving right before the opponent, he thrusted the sword at Yuan Cheng, his face. Yuan Cheng, his face turned green. Not only did Hunyo know this move, but so did Ling Han. Pung! Ling Han formed a fist with his right hand and fired it at Yuan Cheng, his face. The powerful energy surged by and instantly sent Yuan Cheng, he flying. Pa! Yuan Cheng, he fell on the ground, landing firmly on his back. He didn't have a strong physique, and he couldn't activate an origin power body shield just now, instantly making him groan in pain. Convinced yet?" Ling Han said with a smile. "No, not convinced." "Yuan Cheng," he said, bracing himself. "That's good. I was afraid you'd admit defeat too early. I hadn't fought to my heart's content." Ling Han laughed loudly and charged up to launch a series of aggressive attacks. Pang, pang, pang. Yuan Cheng, he couldn't even move his sword now, being beaten by Ling Han. Everyone exclaimed inwardly for his misfortune. This guy's luck was truly terrible, first being trampled on by Hunyao, then trampled on by Ling Han, completely without any strength to fight back. Not that Yuan Cheng, he wasn't strong, it was quite the contrary, he was really very, very strong. Amongst the younger generation, he could probably try for top 10, but Ling Han and Hunyao were too strong to the point of surpassing the limit of the younger generation. To suppress Ling Han and Hunyao, one had to be half to one generation older than them. For example, the geniuses above 30 years old, like Small Saber King and Lang Yutian. Otherwise, in the same age segment, there was probably no one that could rival Ling Han. Much less Hunyao. The majority of people hadn't even awoken their spirit bases at the age of 7 to 8. So how could they fight her? I admit defeat. After being beaten so terribly, Yuan Cheng, he finally couldn't bear it and admitted defeat. This was also because of the agreement earlier, or else he'd rather die and not give in. Ling Han smiled slightly, tossed out a few bottles of medicinal pills casually, and said, "The red bottle is for healing, the blue bottle can instantly recover origin power, the purple bottle can aid in cultivation, increasing your conversion of spirit chi by a fold." Not to mention Yuan Cheng, he surprised. Even the other people also jumped out of their own skin. Healing and recovering origin power were no big deal, but increasing conversion of spirit chi by a fold was truly shocking. For normal people, no matter whether it was the accumulation of origin power or comprehension of martial arts, either was slow, but both needed to be worked on simultaneously. As for geniuses, the comprehension of martial arts was relatively easier, so the accumulation of origin power was the greater restriction to them. Long story short, this was equivalent to increasing cultivation speed by a fold so precious. Yuan Cheng, he was stirred up. He was forced to acknowledge Ling Han outwardly as a boss, rejecting it at heart, but now this feeling of rejection began to dissolve. Having such a boss wasn't so bad-rich and generous. Ling Han smiled. Subduing someone was nothing more than applying kindness and might. After applying might earlier, now it was kindness's turn, and he wouldn't believe it wouldn't subdue this guy. "Thank you, boss." Yuan Cheng, he said in a low voice, his face somewhat red. He'd never called anyone boss before. "Call me young Master Han in the future," Ling Han said. "Forget about boss and whatnot. We're not gangsters. That'd make us appear cheap." "Yes, young Master Han." Yuan Cheng, he corrected smoothly, because Hunyao was staring at him with baleful eyes. Apparently, if he dared to respond wrongly, the little girl would give him hell. "All right, you can go. I'll call you if there's anything." Ling Han waved his hand. Yuan Cheng, he was overjoyed. He'd thought Ling Han would send him here and there, like making him plunder rare stones or the like. Acknowledging this boss wasn't a loss. Look, although he took a beating, he also received replenishment of lots of medicinal pills, the preciousness of which definitely surpassed the beating he took. He was afraid that Ling Han would change his mind, so he hurriedly turned to leave. Young Master Han, I'll also take you for a boss. You can also bestow me some medicinal pills," Li Fengyu said, puffing up his face. "How about you become my sister's husband?" "Brother," Li Zixian said, gritting her teeth. Why did this brother of hers always want to sell her? Ling Han pondered and said, "All right, I'll take you as an underling." Although Big Mouth Li's strength wasn't anything great, the special trait of having a big mouth actually had favorable uses. In the future, if Ling Han were to rope in geniuses from all sides, a propagandist like this was needed. "All right, brother-in-law." Li Fengyu fawned on him. Even Ling Han was speechless and said, "You're not afraid that someone will really seal your mouth one day?" "Hee, young Master Han. Young Master Han." Li Fengyu didn't dare to talk foolishly anymore, because not only Ling Han revealed a displeased look, Hunyo and Zhu Xianer both revealed furious expressions as well. If he were to offend 3 people at once, then he would get more than he'd bargained for. Continue what? Ling Han was just about to let everyone continue to move on, but it suddenly shook underneath his feet. The ground let out a groan, and an extremely terrifying crack was extending from afar at an extremely fast pace. "Xiao! Xiao! Xiao!" Everyone hurriedly flew up. The mist was dispersing quickly, and spiderweb-like fissures appeared over the entire mountain valley. "Earthquake!" everyone cried out. Ling Han looked into the distance, revealing a shocked look, and said, "It's not an earthquake. A big guy's coming out." Chapter 665, Great Corpse Monster, Azure Phoenix, Divine Empress. Chapter 665, Great Corpse Monster, Azure Phoenix, Divine Empress. Reverie _Henny. That was truly a large one. Everyone revealed shocked looks. It was a colossal monster, 300 meters in height, and its entire body was made up of corpses. At least 10,000 corpses formed its current body, instilling fear into people as they beheld it. Each corpse seemed to come alive, extending its white bony arms and opening its mouth as if screaming. The land cracked open, and this colossal skeleton stood on the mountains, emitting a demonic godlike presence. Ling Han couldn't see through this monster's strength, because this guy wasn't a normal martial artist. It was assembled by over 10,000 corpses, somehow seeming to have obtained a second life. He only felt one thing: this monster was very strong and extremely powerful. This can't also be part of the examination that the Academy is giving us, can it? Li Fengyu swallowed his saliva, his eyes popping out. "I'm afraid even the Restore Heaven Academy can't create such a monster." Ling Han shook his head. The objective of the 5 great ancient sects was for obtaining a realm pill once every 10,000 years, so they couldn't possibly research such a thing. To say it was the 1,000-corpse sect was more likely. Wait, why were there so many skeletal corpses? Moreover, each skeletal corpse was so powerful, at least with the heaven tier cultivation. So could it be this place was once a battlefield in the ancient times, the place of the final battle between the martial artists of the vast lands and the divine 5 great sects? Otherwise, how could there possibly be so many powerful ancient corpses? However, after these ancient corpses were buried for too many years, they evidently underwent an incredible change, turning into a corpse king. Over 10,000 heaven tier elites, even possibly with a few shattering void tier beings, though having gone through countless years, the vein-like patterns on the bones remained, no longer having the divine brilliance at that time. The amount was there after all. So how terrifying would it be when combined? Go, 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 go. Ling Han said no more. He picked up Zhu Xianer and Hunyo and dashed for it. After Qin Lianyu, Li Fengyu, and Li Zixian were startled momentarily, they also ran in a hurry. Even the most formidable Ling Han chose to run, so they sure as hell weren't fighting. However, some people didn't know fear, and even thought that this was part of the Restore Heaven Academy's examination, charging over enthusiastically. The colossal corpse waved its giant hand and instantly stirred up a storm. The entire ground was lifted like a carpet, and the few that charged up were instantly smashed into minced meat, while the terrifying power continued to sweep towards the others. Pung, 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 pung. Ling Han and the others were instantly sent flying several kilometers away, each one of them hacking out blood repeatedly. It was also because Ling Han reacted quickly, immediately taking to his heels, or else, if they'd remained any closer, they'd have also been crushed into dust. Not only them, for there were also many people that were sent flying, but they were much worse off, as some had their arms broken, some their legs, and some their sternum. except for a few people who just entered the mountain valley, simply hacking out blood. The other people were all severely injured. Even if the people here were all geniuses, they weren't even cannon fodder in front of this giant corpse monster. The gap was indescribably vast. With this one attack, at least 1/10 of those who'd passed the first stages test met an untimely end. After this giant corpse monster let out an attack, it seemed to awaken from a daze. Crimson-colored rays came out from its 2 oculi, sweeping past the living creatures below as it revealed a frightening smile. This corpse monster actually possessed its own consciousness. Everyone felt a chill within. Corpse soldiers were equivalent to puppets, no matter how strong they were, and could always be dealt with, but once its intelligence was unlocked, that would be terrifying. What could they do? It was apparent that this corpse monster targeted them and wanted their blood and flesh as food. But being targeted by such a vicious monster, could they escape? Ling Han thought whether he should use the Black Tower. This corpse monster probably reached the Shattering Void tier level, and even surpassed normal Shattering Void tiers, being simply unstoppable. Dare to run rampant here? At this moment, a figure appeared in the sky. It was a woman wielding a long sword. She looked only 30 years old and wore palace clothing, graceful and gorgeous, looking extremely charming. Ling Han's pupils, involuntarily constricted, couldn't see through this woman's cultivation at all. Azure Phoenix, Divine Empress. Qin Lianyu and Li Fengyu cried out simultaneously, looks of extreme admiration on their faces. Azure Divine Phoenix, Divine Empress. Cloud Phoenix Sect's current sect master. A Shattering Void tier elite. No, based on Feng Pian's statement, not only was she in the Shattering Void tier, but also in its peak stage, the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. In terms of tier, she was number 1 in the present age, being able to become the leader of one of the 5 great sects. How could Azure Divine Phoenix Empress not be a martial arts genius? It wasn't known how many hundreds of years old she was, yet she looked only in the 30s, her skin beautiful like jade, filled with elegant qualities. The corpse monster seemed to be somewhat fearful of Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, and didn't attack immediately. Instead, it roared angrily towards the sky, and an eerie phenomenon occurred. A row of eyeballs grew on its face, exactly 9 of them. Each eye emerged in a different color, but all were inclining towards blood red without exception, emitting a threatening and frantic presence. 9-eyed Corpse King. Ling Han finally recalled a monster that appeared in legends. What 9-eyed Corpse King? There was no lack of curious people here, still having the mood to inquire at this time. Ling Han brought everyone to retreat, as he said, based on the 1,000 corpse sects classification of corpse soldier strength. Altogether, there's bronze armored corpse, silver armored corpse, gold armored corpse, the 3 large levels, with each including 3 small levels. So we have a total of 9 levels, conforming with the 9 tiers of martial arts from body, refining to heaven tier. And reaching Shattering Void tier, the corpse soldier would be called a Corpse King. The Corpse King's strength is gauged based on how many spare eyes it grew, and 1 more eye is equivalent to 1 layer of tier. Everyone was shocked and said, so that Corpse King possesses cultivation at the 9th layer of the Shattering Void tier. Ling Han nodded, but the anxiousness on his face lessened significantly because Azure Divine Phoenix Maiden was consummate Shattering Void tier elite. Even if she wasn't a super genius, as long as she possessed battle prowess that corresponded to her tier, she wouldn't be weaker than the 9-eyed Corpse King. This Corpse King had just evolved as expected, but once it formed, it possessed the strength of 9 eyes. Truly shocking. 9-eyed Corpse King? Azure Phoenix Divine Empress also snorted and held out her long sword. Wang, vein-like patterns flashed, extremely resplendent. Heavenly Phoenix Sword. Ling Han cried out, the look in his eyes extremely complicated. This sword was the one used by Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden in previous years, but this sword had been only a 9th tier spirit tool, and now it crossed into the 10th tier. Apparently, after Heavenly Divine Phoenix Maiden charged into the Shattering Void tier, she also nourished this treasured sword into a 10th tier spirit tool. Seeing something that reminded him of her, Ling Han was obviously extremely moved. "Say, boss, you fixed your eyes on Azure Phoenix Divine Empress," leering, "could you be moved?" Li Fengyu went off with his big mouth again. Chapter 666, True Phoenix Bloodline. Chapter 666, True Phoenix Bloodline. Reverie _ Henny. Move? Move your sister's heart. Ling Han couldn't help but lash out with a hit. Li Fengyu turned pale and said, "You've got wild schemes about my sister, as expected. This, say, brother-in-law. Let's discuss the problem of dowry." "Brother." Li Zixian finally erupted and smacked at Li Fengyu. Not only her, Zhu Xianer and Hunyo also joined delightedly and beat this big mouth into screaming repeatedly, making him pay the price for having a cheap mouth. Azure Divine Phoenix, Empress, raised the long sword and struck towards the nine-eyed Corpse King. A shattering void tier attack was too frightening. The sword ray flew through the skies and hung. Stars exploded from the sword light, turning into countless fragments and sprinkling over the corners of the vast lands. The nine-eyed Corpse King was calm and fearless. Pung, 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 it tread on its massive feet towards Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, dashing at an extremely high speed, and the corpses on its upper body let out shrieks one after another, shooting out as tangible sound waves. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress snorted heavily and also let out a battle cry, as of a phoenix's cry. The sound wave manifested and turned into an Azure Divine Phoenix, countering Nine-Eyed Corpse King's sound waves. Pung, pung, pung. The sound waves collided, and martial intent of both clashed violently, casting extremely resplendent rays of light upon the skies. In the sky, countless stars exploded in shock and fell down in small fragments, but the majority couldn't pass through the terrifying layer of astral winds in the sky, being shattered into dust. The Nine-Eyed Corpse King soundwave attack was neutralized by Azure Phoenix Divine Empress, but the aftershock swept by and still sent the people who had already escaped the mountain valley flying. Like severed kites flying in the sky, they landed uncontrollably and hacked out blood one after another. Even if neutralized, a shattering void tier elite's attacks remaining aftershock of the aftershock was still filled with shocking destructive power. If the people here weren't at the flower blossom or the spiritual infant tier, then under this attack they wouldn't just be hacking out blood, they'd all be dead. Even so, flower blossom tier cultivators all had a few broken bones, while spiritual infant tier ones were slightly better, simply hacking out a few mouthful of blood. Ling Han took Zhu Xianer and Hunyo into his embrace and forcibly took the attack on with his own back. With his current physique comparable to 8th tier rare metal, forcibly taking this sound wave attack only made him look somewhat pale, but not to the extent of hacking out blood. Brother-in-law, help. Li Fengyu's face was full of blood, unsure whether it from beating just now or from being shocked by the wave. As expected, so long as he lived, he'd keep on acting cheap. Ha 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 ha. What the heck were you guys doing, looking so tragic? The rabbit appeared with a carrot in its mouth. Who knew whether it was found or stolen from somewhere? With so much chaos, it could obviously feel it, running over to watch the fun. No kidding. 2 great shattering void tier elites battling. Can't you see for yourself? Ling Han said in a foul tone, "Yo, this little girl's not bad. Just right to be Uncle Rabbit's servant girl." The rabbit stared at Azure Phoenix Divine Empress while gnawing on the spirit medicine, its ruffian character fully displayed. Ling Han sighed and said, "Li Big Mouth, you've met a kindred spirit. Come, become sworn brothers with the rabbit." "Tisk, what's Uncle Rabbit identity?" Uncle Rabbit wouldn't even be pleased if this brat was a distant 18th generation grandson. Uncle Rabbit disparaged Li Fengyin as being worthless. Li Fengyu wasn't irritated and simply said to Hunyao, "Lord Hunyao, let's eat rabbit meat." "All right." Hunyao instantly beamed with joy. Her fierce eyes targeted the rabbit's buttocks, her small mouth broadened, and saliva already drooled out. The rabbit instinctively covered its butt and said, "Damn brat, dare instigate this little girl again. Be careful, Uncle Rabbit will step on your golden face." Ling Han grabbed Hunyao and didn't let them cause a disturbance at this moment, and said, "Come, come, come, carry a few rocks over. We're watching the show here. It should be safe at this distance." His gaze swept by, and seeing the Rain Emperor and Murongqing, he naturally felt relieved. Azure Divine Phoenix Empress and the Nine-Eyed Corpse King battled fiercely. This was the strongest battle at the Shattering Void tier, something even Ling Han had never seen in the previous life, so it wasn't to be missed. Earlier, Feng Piyin also showed his hand at Million Treasure City, but with the fourth Killing Formations impediment, no one could see the specifics of the battle. However, it was different now. The Nine-Eyed Corpse King was over 300 meters tall and could be clearly seen anywhere. Ling Han also cultivated the Eye of Truth and obviously saw it even clearer. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was truly strong, a consummate Shattering Void tier elite. In this world, she could be said to be unstoppable, and on top of the 10th tier spirit tool in her hand, the Heavenly Phoenix Sword, her destructive power was incapable of further increase. Even though the corpses on the Nine-Eyed Corpse King's body were once in the Heaven tier, even some others were in the Shattering Void tier. Deep sword marks appeared on them with a sword strike. It was just that the Nine-Eyed Corpse King's body was just too colossal, and being slashed by a sword was like a normal person being cut by a nail clipper, suffering a tiny injury. The Corpse King wasn't a normal corpse soldier. Such an existence already formed its own consciousness, as if a new life was bred, becoming a new species in the world. It wasn't in pain, yet it went into a violent rage. The corpses all over its body raised their heads to roar in anger, and the sound waves turned into a gigantic spear, held by the Nine-Eyed Corpse King, piercing at Azure Phoenix Divine Empress. "Evil creature, leave your head!" Azure Phoenix Divine Empress shouted as Heavenly Phoenix sword struck out a sword ray over 300 meters long, looking terrifyingly shocking. The Nine-Eyed Corpse King roared violently repeatedly. Its physique was too tough under the blessing of vein-like pattern sit was no inferior to 10th tier rare metal. If it weren't for Azure Divine Phoenix Empress using a 10th tier spirit tool to strike it and her condensing of a sword ray, she really might not have been able to deal with its defense. It waved its two arms and closed them towards the middle, trying to clap Azure Phoenix Divine Empress to death. Pa! The two large palms closed and let out a heaven-shaking great bang. 99% of the people nearby bled from the 7 apertures, being too horrible a sight to look at, while some were even knocked right out with this great bang. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was actually clapped to death like this. Huh! A raging azure flame burst forth from the skeletal palms and turned into a sky full of flames brighter than the sun. The Nine-Eyed Corpse King bawled and hurriedly retracted its hands. Azure Divine Phoenix Empress could be seen standing loftily in the skies, and her entire body burned with azure-colored divine flames, forming a fiery tailpiece over 3,000 meters long. It made her looking even more beautiful and alluring. This woman isn't a pure human. Uncle Rabbit can sense a shred of true phoenix bloodline in her body, the rabbit said while gnawing on a spirit medicine. However, compared to Uncle Rabbit's pure bloodline, she's far off. As expected, she's more suited to become Uncle Rabbit's servant girl. True Phoenix Bloodline. Chapter 667, The 10th Eye. Chapter 667, The 10th Eye. Reverie _ Henny. True Phoenix. In the legends, true phoenixes were on par with true dragons, and true dragons were the strongest of divine beasts. 9 dragons tyrant body art, which Ling Han cultivated, used 9 dragons as a power standard, and it was precisely because the power of dragons was the strongest. Divine beasts blessed by heaven didn't need to cultivate at all. At maturity, they possessed terrifying strength, and the power of true dragons could even shatter the firmament, breaking open the universe, and it became God Realm's measurement standard for power. Of course, martial artists cultivating could still surpass the power of 9 dragons, or else there wouldn't be the saying of the power of 9 dragons. But here, the power of true dragons and true phoenixes was definitely the limit of the extreme. If Azure Phoenix Divine Empress could truly possess the complete power of a true phoenix, then with an arbitrary slap, this corpse king would disperse into a pile of bones again. The 5 great sects were all based on inheritance from the divine plane, like how Zi Shuexian was a descendant of a great race related to thunder there, being extremely powerful. Thus, since Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was also extremely likely to be a descendant from the God Realm, possessing a shred of true phoenix bloodline wasn't anything strange. The 9-eyed Corpse King actually revealed a fearful look. For corpse soldiers that weren't afraid of death and didn't know pain, this was an incredible thing. That was also because the 9-eyed Corpse King's level was too high, deriving its own consciousness, so it knew how to measure the situation it was in. However, brutality was all that was in corpse soldiers after all. It soon suppressed the fear in its heart, and with a loud roar, chong, 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 bone spikes grew out from all over its body. Each spike was over 30 meters long, making it look like a hedgehog. The Corpse King charged at Azure Phoenix, Divine Empress again. Each bone spike had gray-colored vein-like patterns that lit up, emitting a presence of despair. Ling Han turned pale with shock and said, "Not good!" The thing that Zhu Xianer and the others feared the most now was hearing Ling Han say "not good." Each time he said "not good," something not good would definitely happen. "Brother-in-law, can't you not say not good?" Li Feng Yu said, shivering. Ling Han shook his head and said, "This Corpse King has just awakened, opening 9 eyes simultaneously earlier, and now it grew out bone spikes. I assume it's still in the process of fusing with those corpses and hasn't reached its complete form." Qin Lian Yu turned pale with fright and said, "You're saying that after it completes the fusion, it'll become even stronger?" "Inevitably." Ling Han sighed. "Hiss." Now, Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was only tied in battle with the 9-eyed Corpse King. If this Corpse King became even stronger, wouldn't it mean that even Azure Phoenix Divine Empress be unable to suppress it? Seeing this Corpse King's appearance, it seemed like it could fuse with more corpses, and if Azure Phoenix Divine Empress was killed and her corpse absorbed as well, then how powerful would it become? It would probably break through the shattering Void Tier's limit and cross into the God Tier. Everyone's hands and feet turned cold. If it really turned out so, no place in the entire world would be pure. All would be killed off completely by this Corpse King as it devoured flesh and blood and fused with skeletal remains, evolving into the strongest corpse soldier in history. Ling Han even thought of how this had to do with Thousand Corpse Sect. This should be an ancient battlefield. The experts from the 5 sects of God Realm descended and fought the ultimate battle here against rebels, and the final end was obviously burying the prosperous martial arts age 10,000 years ago. The Thousand Corpse Sect was also a great sect in the God Realm, certainly having means to escape the refinement of the Pill Realm in the end, so they could secretly tamper with the corpses which should have rotted here, turning them into corpse soldiers. With the 5 great sects keeping watch, they also didn't dare to act brazenly and could only do things slowly, resulting in the creation of this monster. Probably, Ling Han couldn't be sure, but he could conclude that this definitely had to do with the Thousand Corpse Sect. After growing out bone spikes, the Corpse King's battle prowess increased drastically. Each bone spike was equivalent to a heavenly spear, covered in vein-like patterns, and could even pose a great threat to shattering void tier elites. Even Azure Phoenix Divine Empress didn't dare to oppose it directly and kept moving around to dodge the sharp edges. After all, her physique couldn't be compared to the Corpse King's. However, she didn't dodge randomly and constantly counterattacked with a long sword, unleashing shocking sword rays. Moreover, her tailpiece was also completely formed by flames, and as it whisked, it also created considerable disturbance for the Corpse King. That was definitely no ordinary fire. Its destructive power shocking, and it left burnt marks on the Corpse King's body when sweeping past it, burning the skeletons into ash. In the short term, the two elites were evenly matched. Nevertheless, it was just as Ling Han had said, this Corpse King was actually like an infant that was just born. At the start, it only had pure instincts, which was its natural tendency to kill, so it had been moving based on its instincts. However, as the battle progressed, it understood how to use power and also seemed to grow, becoming more and more terrifying. This change was extremely evident. The skeletal corpses on its body were in the process of fusion, and the bones coalescing looked as if they weren't hard bones, but instead made of sand. In the process of the fusion, the Corpse King's body also shrank slowly, but its power was increasing. Ling Han shivered within and said, "Earlier it was 10,000 corpse soldiers attacking together, but now it's 1,000, then to 100, and lastly, just one will be remaining." Everyone was smart and immediately understood. The decreasing amount wasn't a good thing, and on the contrary, this was the worst of the worst outcome possible. No matter how 10,000 people worked as one, could the power they unleashed reach the layering of 10,000 shares of power? Definitely not. However, with 1,000 people, and each person's power multiplied by 10, attacking jointly, whose power would you say was stronger? Not to mention 100 people, 10 people, or when one was remaining, if the power was multiplied by 10,000, then that would completely equal the power of 10,000 people, not being a single bit reduced. The Corpse King was in the process of advancing in this direction. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress evidently also saw it, for her sword strikes became more rushed. Pooh! Piu Piu sword rays slashed on the Corpse King's body and kept sweeping away broken bones. But with the Corpse King's colossal body, this was no big deal at all. Moreover, as its body shrunk, the Corpse King's power became stronger, and the defensive area still continued to shrink. This wasn't delightful news. After half a day, the Corpse King's body already shrunk by half and was only over 150 meters tall. The crimson light in its eyes was fiercer by more than one fold. Looking at it could bring pain in one's heart to the point of bursting. Pah! The Corpse King's movements halted as another eye actually grew out from its forehead. A 10th eye. 9 eyes was the 9th layer of the shattering void tier, so what about 10 eyes? It definitely couldn't reach the god tier, but its battle prowess increased by at least 1 star. The battle prowess of the shattering void tier elites was extremely terrifying to begin with, and to increase their battle prowess by 1 star was as hard as climbing the skies. Now, the Corpse King fused its body even further, and finally obtained a qualitative change. The aura over its entire body grew explosively, hung, and the entire Ghost Lock ravine collapsed. The Corpse King attacked again. Its bone spikes were heaven-shocking, collapsing stars in the sky, just as if world was ending. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress finally revealed a cautious look, reaching out with her hand to swipe the heavenly phoenix sword, and said, "Open!" Wang, the vein-like patterns on heavenly phoenix sword lit up again, and was several hundred times more powerful. A giant, colorful phoenix flew out from the blade as if a divine spirit descending to earth, emitting endless divine might. Tool Spirit, a 10th tier Tool Spirit. Chapter 668. The 9th Underworld King appears. Chapter 668. The Ninth Underworld King appears. Reverie underscore. Henyi. Ling Han felt a familiar presence. This was Heavenly Phoenix, Divine Maiden. He'd been tormented by her countless times in the previous life, resulting in him being extremely sensitive towards this kind of aura. In the later periods, he could sense it when Heavenly Divine Phoenix, Maiden hadn't even approached in a 5-kilometer radius, and would immediately take to his heels. Now, Ling Han was left with endless yearning. Heavenly Phoenix appeared, and with a sharp cry, charged the Corpse King. This Heavenly Phoenix was at least 350 meters long, and with its wings spread, it even reached 660 meters in width. In front of it, the Corpse King immediately became similar to a kid. Its speed was too fast, and with a flutter of its wings, it dove before the Corpse King. Without any mystic arts, it just tore with its claws and pecked with its beak, yet caused terrifying destruction. The Corpse King roared angrily, but was totally suppressed by the Heavenly Phoenix. Its entire body fell towards the ground and reached out with both hands to push the Heavenly Phoenix, but its hands were burnt black. Such a terrifying spirit tool. Ling Han compared it to Demon Birth Sword, and instantly felt that Demon Birth Sword was pathetically weak. However, he'd never fully unleashed Demon Birth Sword's true might, and for it to become a 10th-tier spirit tool, how could it be ordinary? His tier was too low, after all. Xiao! At this moment, a flash of saber light swept by. It was undoubtedly light, yet it was extremely dark, as if gloomier than the dark night, emitting the presence of death. This saber strike was going straight for the Heavenly Phoenix. You dare! Azure Phoenix Divine Empress moved with her sword and arrived before the saber light in a flash. With a slash of her sword, her attack turned out to be a 300 meters long sword ray. Pum! A heavy bang resonated, and everyone's ears instantly went deaf. Completely unable to hear sounds, the entire world seemed to become extremely quiet, and only the Corpse King and the Heavenly Phoenix were carrying out a soundless fight. Divine Empress, long time no see. A faint voice came from afar. It was gentle and soft, yet filled with a ghastly cold presence, as if coming from the underworld itself. Ninth, Underworld, King. Azure Phoenix, Divine Empress, said word by word. A chilling glare burst within her eyes, and her aura immediately increased by several folds. Ling Han was shocked. This was Azure Divine Phoenix Empress's true strength? Earlier, she had been just playing around with the Corpse King, who was the 9th Underworld King. Far away, that voice went on. This lord came here only to take what this sect has left here several thousand years ago. Why must Divine Empress act as if confronted by a formidable enemy? Humph, you even dared to scheme for this place. Is the Thousand Corpse sect inviting its own destruction? Azure Phoenix Divine Empress said in an icy tone. Ling Han instantly realized that this 9th Underworld King was Thousand Corpse sect master, or else he definitely wouldn't have the right to converse with Heavenly Divine Phoenix Empress and make Azure Phoenix Divine Empress intentionally hold back, waiting for the appearance of a 9th Underworld King. You guys eat meat, so can't you give this sect some soup to drink? 9th Underworld King said indifferently, appearing extremely calm. However, his voice was truly horrifying, just as if it were coming from the underworld, and hearing it would make one's soul freeze. Since the ancient times, good and evil have been incompatible, and annihilating you all is our responsibility. Azure Phoenix, Divine Maiden, determinately. Good. In the surrounding, all the geniuses that participated in the exam raised their arms and called out in support. The Thousand Corpse sect was a target of scorn, which everyone called out to kill. Ling Han shook his head inwardly. The 5 sects and the Thousand Corpse sect were actually birds of a feather, none any better than the other. However, the 5 sects did it cleanly, using 10,000 years to brainwash the realm, and now these people were just suckers being betrayed just thinking about it was woeful. The greatest woe was that even if you reminded them, they'd think you were saying frightening things to intentionally ruin the 5 great sects' reputation. Those able to think calmly were the meager lot. The 9th underworld king wasn't irritated and said, "There are too many confused people in the world. If this lord wrote all the dirty work you guys have done into a short story and sold it to the entire world, would you say that there'd be people who'd believe it? As long as one person believes, a seed would be planted, and the seed would become a towering tree sooner or later. Spread fallacies to deceive people, and this empress will cut you down today." Azure Phoenix, divine empress, said coldly, and charged where the 9th underworld king was with her sword. Wang! A flash of saber light soared into the sky as a lofty man appeared, holding a large dark saber. Dark light intertwined around his entire body, and he was as if a demonic god that could support the firmament and crumble the underworld. This was Thousand Corpse Sect's 9th underworld king. In comparison, Rong Huanxian was a small fry relying on 3 lives casket to run rampant. He was in no way comparable with the 9th underworld king at all. Then let this lord experience the divine empress's sword techniques. The 9th underworld king waved his saber and engaged her in a fight. It was obviously also a 10th tier spirit tool, and it was one of Thousand Corpse Sect's 3 great sect treasures. Demonic Noise Saber. Who? As the demonic noise saber was swung, an extremely strange sound resonated, and the sound waves manifested into countless monsters with sabers, swords, and weapons, slashing at Azure Phoenix, divine empress. Battle up in the skies. Azure Phoenix, divine empress, soared towards the skies. As you wish. The 9th underworld king also soared into the skies. The 2 great shattering void tier warriors engaged in a great battle, but 9th underworld king's weapon had the advantage, because Heavenly Phoenix sword's spirit tool already left the sword and was in a fierce fight with the Corpse King. Now, Heavenly Phoenix sword was just a sharp 10th tier weapon and not a spirit tool. For elites at their level, a small gap could influence the outcome of the battle, let alone a tool spirit's presence. At the scene, the 9th underworld king had complete advantage, but it also wasn't easy for an elite at this level to be defeated. Azure Phoenix divine maiden could sustain her resistance for a long, long time, and when Heavenly Phoenix sword's tool spirit suppressed the Corpse King, the situation in their battle would change again. He, 9th underworld king, was composed, not at all rushed, and said, "Divine Empress, you think this sect waited several thousand years just for a normal Corpse King?" As he spoke, that Corpse King underwent another transformation. Its body shrunk again and became only 60 meters tall, but its forehead manifested another eye, an 11th eye. Instantly, the Corpse King's might grew greatly, and it shook off the Heavenly Phoenix with a single attack. It opened its mouth and spat out a dark light, which was as if shackles, wrapping around the Heavenly Phoenix. This light was extremely fast as it bound the Heavenly Phoenix, tightening and actually manifesting with bone spikes firing out, piercing into the Heavenly Phoenix's body. The Heavenly Phoenix cried in pain, and as it flapped its wings, large constellations of stars were shattered in the sky. Azure Phoenix, divine empress, revealed a shocked look and said, "You retrieved the pond of the underworld." If it weren't for the pond of the underworld's water's blessing, the Corpse King definitely wouldn't break through the limit of 10 eyes. She should have known. It was just that the Thousand Corpse Sect had long lost the knowledge of the whereabouts of their 3 great sect treasures several tens of millennia ago. "Correct," the 9th Underworld King said loftily. Azure Phoenix, divine empress, thought shortly, suddenly realizing something, and said, "The pond of the underworld was within Million Treasure City. So that's why you spent so much effort scheming to take down that city." As expected of the divine empress, How truly exceptionally intelligent, the ninth underworld king applauded. To nourish this corpse king, this lord took all of the pond's water, convinced that this corpse king can at least evolve into a 15-eyed one. Azure Phoenix Divine Empress's countenance changed again and again. This time, she finally felt it difficult to handle.